This mysterious guy was just slumped over on the dirt. He coughed and muttered that this was as far as they could go. You could tell he was a swordsman since his blade was lying. The guy stares down his rivals, flashes a cocky grin saying he's already won, and then gives a goofy smile while wiggling his wings. This is Yuki, and even though he looks like a straight-up demon now, he was actually just a normal guy named Sagawa Yuki before he got reincarnated into this beast. So when this guy got reincarnated, he ended up with a totally broken cheat power. But he didn't come back as a human. He was reborn as a straight-up demon, and the horn on his head and wings on his back prove he's definitely not a person anymore. Yuki stared at the guys face down on the floor, thinking it was crazy that these losers were actually supposed to be the hero team. They're already halfway up the Demon Lord's castle, surrounded by elite demons and a deadly boss room. But he's worried because Yuki still has no clue how to handle The world is never going to find peace until the hero finally takes down the Demon Lord, and if he somehow loses to some random low-level demon, everyone's going to freak out and our MC smirks, thinking about how bad it would be if the world went to hell. But right now, he's got to heal the hero party and just dump them at the closest village. Yuki stared down at the defeated bodies and planned to tell the high-level demons that everyone had just escaped. He looks at the blonde guy and realizes it's the human hero Yuga, remembering how he screamed about the holy sword Excalibur while swinging that sword right in his face. Yuki just grinned and blasted back with a massive explosion. So our guy is moving this dude out, but now he's got to figure out who's actually going to heal him first. He looks over at the girl and realizes the next person on the hero's team is a young magician named Meera. She kept giving the hero these super flirty looks the whole time, even before they actually started throwing down. This guy was so annoyed that he just snapped and blasted the mage girl right at the start. The third teammate is a serious swordsman named Raven, and while he's super quiet and cold, he definitely acts like he's way too cool for everyone. This swordsman's face alone was enough to trigger our hero, so he used some high-level dark magic to wipe him out the second the fight started. And even though he said he was making the guy disappear, he actually just turned him invisible. Nobody saw him coming, so while the hero and mage were distracted, the kid blasted them both with magic, and the hero didn't feel a thing. And just like that, there's only one hero left standing on the team. Meet Cecilia, she's a priest girl. After wiping out the rest of the hero's squad, he started thinking about what he should do with her. Our hero blurred right behind the priest and knocked her out cold in an instant. Yuki took one look at Cecilia and saw she wasn't hurt, so he figured he didn't need to use any healing magic on her. The guy took a closer look and was shocked by how totally helpless she seemed in that moment. Our main guy was totally stunned because he thought this girl was the most beautiful person he'd ever seen. He's debating keeping the girl locked up, but he knows the Lord will lose it if he messes up. Not that he cares, since he's totally sure he could take the Demon Lord in a fight anyway. But seriously, keeping prisoners like this is just totally messed up. He tells his crew she's the final one and to pick her up, and as they get moving, he says a final goodbye to his angel. 3 days later, the hero and his squad, a cocky swordsman, a smart mage, and a priest, finally bust into the Demon Lord's territory. Our MC is straight up laughing because the hero and those stubborn idiots actually came back for more, so he introduces himself as Yuki, the leader of the Dark Knights, and tells them he's personally sending them all to hell. Yuki realized he was about to announce his trash rank to the whole hero squad with total confidence. The hero then dropped a bomb, saying Yuki's name actually belonged to a literal demon. Our guy dodged a massive hit and locked eyes with Cecilia the priest while he was still midair. He dodged the girl's magic and the swordsman's attacks like it was nothing, but then he suddenly froze and stared right at Cecilia, who had no clue why this demon was even looking at her. Suddenly, the hero cuts him off and tells the guy to go all out, making Yuki feel super awkward as he apologizes, but he can't stop wondering why he's staring at. He admits he's being a total jerk to enemies who are actually taking the fight seriously. That's when he pulls out some insane high-tier dark magic called Endless Darkness. Our hero stared at the demon and was totally freaking out. Yuki just wrecked the entire hero squad, leaving them all sprawled out on the ground without moving a muscle. He rushed over and saw she didn't have a single scratch on her because she's a total pro who used a barrier spell instantly, and man, he was just so glad she was okay. He used his magnetic powers to wreck the hero's squad again and dumped them in a nearby village. Then a month later, he totally crushed their next attack. Pretty soon, The Demon Lord and his elite monsters started looking down on the hero's team like they were total weaklings, and even though he hates admitting it, he's just built different. Without him, the heroes would have totally crushed the Demon Lord, and now he's just lying in bed, thinking about how he's gonna let the whole team die very soon. She's not just a total beauty, she's actually got an awesome personality, and he's definitely following through with his plan next time. A bit later, the heroes' squad finally shows up, and the mage girl tells Yuga they've got to take down this lame demon today so they can finally move on. Our MC just watched with a straight face as the heroes' squad showed up, realizing the leader's name actually was Yuga, and thinking there was no reason to call the guy boring. He stared at the badass swordsman and realized he was still the same quiet guy, thinking he could have at least said something. Cecilia screamed for everyone to fight with everything they had, while the guy just thought his angel was being way too cute. He shuts his eyes and locks in, knowing it's finally time to get to work. Yuki just laughed at the idiots who were actually dumb enough to come back for more, and as the leader of the Dark Knights, he's ready to send every last one of them. The hero and the swordsman charged straight into the heat of battle. The young guy yelled at the top of his lungs that he was ready to throw down. He knew deep down they couldn't. He decides he's done for the day, turning to the hero to ask if he finally gets that he's never going to win this fight. The hero just shrugs and says, "So what?" Because he's got to fight for everyone who's hurting right now. Yuki points right at Cecilia and tells the hero to leave her behind, promising that everyone else can go free if they just hand her over. The hero, the swordsman, and Cecilia were totally stunned, while the mage girl just started giggling at them. Yuki screamed that he'd never go through with it because Cecilia was his best friend, and even after being asked if he was really going to throw away this massive chance, he called off the mage girl screams at Yuga to just take the deal, but he calls her Makana and asks what she's even thinking while the MC watches the whole thing go down. She looks at Yuga and tells him to seriously think it over, because even if he's a total snooze fest, he's got insane magic and actually cares about saving the world. Though Yuga's just annoyed she's still calling him boring. Juge was fuming, shouting that even the thought of leaving Cecilia was a total nightmare. The mage girl says Cecilia can't do it yet, but it's all good as long as they crush the demon lord and get back to her in time. The guy said they totally got it, so they were taking off and leaving Cecilia behind. Grind shouted at everyone to hurry up and push through. Yuga turned to Cecilia and swore they'd definitely come back for her no matter what. The door clicks shut, and now that they're finally alone, he starts feeling super nervous. Cecilia braced herself, knowing she couldn't even scratch this demon, but she was ready to fight the guy until her very last breath. She starts charging up her holy laser, but the MC just puts his hands up and politely asks her to hold on for a second. Cecilia asked what was going on, and if the guy was just waiting for her to lower her guard, but the MC told her she had it all wrong and that he was being totally honest. She asks what his deal is, wondering if he's just messing with her before he finally kills her. The guy says if he wanted them dead, he would have done it at the very start, but his heart is already starting to race. He's dying to confess, telling her he fell for her the second he saw her and straight up asking her to go out with him. Our guy looked at her all red-faced, and she was totally blown away by his big confession. Suddenly, the girl drops into a bow and apologizes, leaving the guy totally speechless. He's curled up in a ball in the corner crying that he got rejected and wants to give up on life, while the girl totally panics and asks if he's actually doing okay. Cecilia suddenly jumped back and called him an enemy, blasting him with magic while demanding to know why he wasn't even trying to fight back. He tells her that since she rejected him, he's totally done with life and just wants to die. The girl got all embarrassed and yelled at him to stop joking around, but Yuki just told her she's adorable when she's mad, even if none of that matters anymore. The guy explains that if he keeps living, he'll be stuck in this room forever, and while the only way out is to attack people, she really doesn't want to hurt anyone. She tells him she's never met a demon like him before, since they're usually just mindless, violent monsters. Our hero drops a bombshell and says he was actually a human in his past life. He used to be a regular guy just like us, and he's totally serious about it. His name, Cecilia wondered if he used to be a regular human, asking why he'd refuse to join their side if he really was one of them. Grand asks her if she would have actually believed him if he said he was on humanity's side. She asks why he doesn't just take down the demon lord to fix his problems, but he tells her there's no way he's doing that because if he actually wins, he's basically trapped in this room now, and he is totally done with living like this. He finally took his shot and confessed to her, deciding this was the perfect way to end his life as a demon, since he's 100% sure her squad is strong enough to crush the. He flashes a grin and says everything's gonna be perfect, but then the girl walks over and tells him he's got it all wrong. Cecilia tells him he's insanely powerful and asks why he isn't using that strength to help people out. With that kind of crazy power, he can just turn into a human and blend right in with the crowd. She reaches out her hand and asks him to escape to the outside world with her, and with the demon lord finally defeated, the whole world was finally at peace. After chilling in the capital city of Minerva for a bit, the whole town went absolutely wild because their legendary hero was finally back home. Word spread like crazy that the hero finally took down the demon lord, and the whole world went wild with joy, even throwing a massive parade in Minerva, the capital of Clarence. While all that crazy stuff was happening, he finally reached the Adventurers Guild and knew he was in the right place. Cecilia talked him into it right inside the demon lord's castle, so he finally made his big escape. He grabbed the map she gave him and started heading straight for Minerva City. A young guy walks into the Adventurers Guild, says sorry for the trouble, and tells them he wants to sign up to be a member. The guy was totally shocked and said he didn't expect anyone to show up today since there's a massive parade going on for the hero team. This guy Clayman was just yawning like he was bored to death, while our main character looked totally shocked and told him he wanted to sign up for the guild. Yuki was low-key wondering if this guy was actually okay, especially since he had total dead fish eyes. The guy asks if he's actually serious about joining the guild. He says the staff is missing and he's got no clue what to do next. He basically thinks the workers are. He grabs everything he needs and hands the kid a form to fill out. It's pretty simple. Just write down your name, your age, and sign a paper saying that if you die, it's totally your own fault. A bit later, the guy turns in his paper, and the man confirms his name is Yuki, and he's 21 before handing him a gift card. He warns the guy not to lose her because a replacement is going to cost him a fortune, and if he does mess up, he better do it within 3 days, or the whole process is going to be a total nightmare. Yuki says he gets it, but he figures the rest of the staff won't be back for at least 3 days, and looking at Claymon, he realizes the guy totally hates his job and there's gotta be a limit to how lazy he can actually be. The guy says it's all over and tells the kid he better give it everything he's got in 3 days, because if he fails, the man is going to have to handle every single request himself. That day, he just tuned out all the whining and smashed through every single task on the list, grumbling the whole time, because even though it was a total drag, it's officially not. That night, he lay in bed and swore he'd climb the ranks and save up enough money to finally give it another shot with Cecilia. He's 100% sure she'll finally say yes next time, and he's so hyped he stays awake the entire night. Just 1 week after joining the guild, he's already crushed enough quests to level up to D rank. He asks the guy if he's blind to all the pretty girls at the counter, since that's where everyone else turns in their quests, so why is he coming to him instead? Yuki just grins and admits he totally thought those pretty ladies were the secretaries at first, but now he's finally gotten used to this guy running the guild's front desk. The guy starts screaming that he's making way too much work for everyone, but Yuki notices that while the others are just getting back to their desks, this dude is already turning in finished requests like a. Yuki told him to man up and stop whining since this was a man's job. The guy snapped back that he wasn't even supposed to be a secretary. The big hero. Out of nowhere, a huge noise broke out, and Yuki immediately started asking what was going down. He spins around and spots a familiar figure apologizing to the crowd and asking if they can finally leave. Yuki was totally lost until Cecilia suddenly appeared, and the whole neighborhood freaked out because they couldn't believe a famous hero was actually standing right there. A little later, Yuki and Cecilia are chilling in the carriage, and she apologizes for not finding him sooner, explaining that the massive parade and party totally ate up all her time. The guy tells her not to stress because he's finally living his best life. He's always dreamed of going to another world, and she says she's just happy he's. Yuki gets totally sidetracked and gives her props for still finding him, but she admits she was actually super nervous since he probably changed his whole look. Finding him actually turned out to be way easier than she thought. She gave him a look of pure disgust like he was total trash. Yuki had no idea what was going on, so Cecilia sighs and asks what's really up, pointing out that the guy is still using his real name and hasn't changed his look at all. He asked why he hadn't changed his name yet, and told the girl she needed to take a way closer look. He pushed through the insane pain to snap off his horn and rip his wings right off, and even though he's scared they'll just grow back, at least it won't happen instantly. A bit later, the driver tells Mrs. Cecilia they've finally made it home, and the guy hops out to see a massive mansion waiting for him. Out of nowhere, sharp spears are pointed right at his throat. A guard barks at him, demanding to know who he thinks he is. He's ordered to get away from Lady Cecilia He didn't give the guards a second thought, remembering how everyone at the guild was gossiping about some weird guy hanging out with Lady Cecilia, and even the driver had been giving him suspicious looks the entire trip. Suddenly, the girl steps right in front of him and orders the guards to lower their spears because he's actually her friend. Yuki caught the guards glaring and could tell they were totally ticked off that Cecilia was hanging out with him. A bit later, the two are sitting at the table when Cecilia looks at Yuki and asks him to leave the guild. Yuki was totally shocked and asked her what she even meant by that. He has no clue why she's suddenly acting like this. Cecilia apologized for throwing such a random request at him. The girl begs him to let her explain, admitting the hero's team definitely beat the demon lord. But the danger from the demons is far from over. The guy facepalms and admits she's totally right. Even though the demon lord is toast, his army is still lurking around, and they can still cause a ton of trouble even without a leader. The demons aren't really a threat since their boss is dead and they're about to turn on each other. But Cecilia says the powerhouse Gala Empire is already getting ready for battle. Every kingdom, even Clarence, is always looking for the best of the best. Girls and daughters of fallen soldiers from all over were literally swamping the hero with marriage proposals. Yuki just figured that. Cecilia explains that the hero isn't the only one who matters since the whole team is important. But then Yuki suddenly gets in a girl's face and gets called out for being. Yuki asks why she suddenly went silent, and Cecilia explains that if he gets famous now, he'll start getting those same big offers too. So the girl decides to hire this guy and pay him, and while Yuki agrees it'll keep his identity a secret, he asks her straight up if she's actually got enough cash to afford him. She's positive that Yuki is way stronger than any S-rank adventurer, and even though she's loaded, she could never actually afford to hire him. She just thinks he's helping because he's totally crushing on her. Yuki catches her confused look and just bolts, yelling that this is the perfect spot to start. He's totally down for them to fall in love, but he's not doing it for the cash. He just laughs and brags about his broken cheat skill, saying that even if a bunch of spies or assassins came for him, they'd be the ones getting wrecked. He just laughs and says he's not falling for any other girls because Cecilia is the only one he has eyes for. Suddenly, he snaps back to reality and realizes he's been telling her everything right to her face this whole time. Cecilia starts shaking before totally losing it and laughing, asking for forgiveness because she just couldn't help herself. He stares at her in total shock, waiting for an answer. But she says she can't explain it first before sighing and admitting that it's all over now. She was so stunned by his answer that she started crying huge crocodile tears, while the guy admitted he only yelled that weird stuff because he was totally caught up in the moment. She's starting to think Yuki was actually a human in a past life, because seriously, have you ever seen a demon this hilarious? He looks her in the eye and asks if she seriously didn't believe him until this very moment. Cecilia says she was just double-checking one last time, while Yuki gives a nervous smile, wondering why she's acting so weird. Eventually, she tells him she's got stuff to do. She smiles and says she had a total blast, asking to hang out again, and Yuki agrees but tells her he's got one more favor to ask. He got super flustered and asked to call her Cecilia, so she smiled and said she'd call him Yuki too. The guy was buzzing with excitement as they parted ways, feeling super hyped that he and Cecilia were finally starting to vibe after promising to see each other again. The guy was totally hyped because the hike was awesome. He got to see Cecilia, and his weekend was off to a perfect start. The guy shows up at the mansion, but the guards block his path and tell him to beat it because the hero is already inside meeting the lady. Even though they made a deal, Yuki realized they were still totally stuck with no way out. He takes a breather and heads out for a walk, but he quickly spots a massive crowd and wonders what all the hype is about. Suddenly, they spot this insanely good-looking swordsman who's making everyone stop and stare. Yuki feels like he's seen this guy before, and the others explain it's because that's actually Raven, the hero's legendary swordsman partner. Our hero sees the swordsman looking totally lost and realizes the guy has zero clue how to handle this massive crowd. The guy decides to help him out of a jam and screams to the crowd that the hero is over there. Everyone bolted where the guy pointed, thinking this was going to be a piece of cake. Raven just stood there all alone, totally lost and not knowing what to do. Suddenly, Yuki grabs his hand and they duck into an alley, and Yuki admits they basically just ran for it, but he keeps a sharp eye on the street to make sure nobody is following them. The kid wonders if the swordsman is actually going to stay quiet, but he didn't save him just to get a thank you. And then Yuki tells Raven to swap his gear so he can sneak around. He's just about to head out, but then the guy suddenly tells Yuki to hold up. Yuki was totally shocked when the swordsman actually started talking, because he never expected this cold, handsome guy to have a voice that sounded straight out of an anime. Our MC asks if he stayed quiet this whole time just because of his voice. The guy says everyone has stuff they'd rather keep hidden. He's got his own secrets too. Raven nervously asks. Yuki says the kid can't help how he sounds. Raven mentions that this guy is actually different because he never laughs at him. Yuki finally realizes the swordsman is actually suffering, which is why. The guy says he isn't laughing because he's met dudes with that voice before, and Raven just smirks. Yuki decides to bail before the hero's squad thinks he's being a jerk, but when he tells the swordsman he's leaving, the guy actually asks him to stay. Raven asks Yuki to be his friend, and Yuki is totally caught off guard by the offer. The swordsman tells him it's totally cool if he's not interested, but since his mom was the only person who didn't laugh at his voice, he really hoped Yuki could be. Our hero is totally down to be friends, so he introduces himself, and the swordsman gets super hyped to reveal his name is Raven and say it's nice to meet him too. Yuki's been in this world for 20 years since he reincarnated, making these his first real friends, and when Raven says he looks familiar, Yuki just plays it cool and says he's imagining things. A bit later, our guy heads over to the Adventurers Guild and orders some breakfast. He thinks his breakfast is super basic, but if he skips it, he's getting a mission. And suddenly a woman walks up and tells him he has a really unique way of eating. Our guy is totally shocked because he didn't even notice this gorgeous girl show up while he was busy stuffing his face with bread. She admits her daughter was right. This guy is actually pretty interesting. Yuki is totally caught off guard. With a smile, she introduces herself as Celia Aquarine. Turns out she's actually... The guy looks totally shocked and says he's hyped to meet you. Then he suddenly grabs the whole salad and swallows it all in one massive gulp. The guy nervously asked what she wanted, but Celia just giggled at how fast he ate and told him he's actually a really interesting guy. She says she heard her guards were being total jerks to him the other day, so she's here to apologize. Yuki's totally shocked because he thought they were being super rude, but he's got a meeting later, so he's not letting it get to him, and he realizes Celia isn't actually that bad. She rudely grilled him about that meeting he mentioned, especially since she heard he was totally in love with Cecilia. Celia grills him about his relationship with her daughter, so he panics and blurts out that he's actually dating a guy friend. The lady smiles and says she totally got the wrong idea, explaining she was just scared her daughter was dating a bad guy. So she apologizes while a shaking Yuki tries to play it cool and says everything's fine. Celia says everything's totally fine and invites him to come along, and when Yuki asks where they're even going, she acts like it's super obvious. She's taking him straight to her mansion. The lady asks if he wants to meet her daughter Cecilia, and Yuki is totally hyped, telling her he's been dying to see her. They finally reach the mansion, and the guy turns to Celia to ask about the guards, pointing out that they've been totally swapped for new ones. She says those guards were way too rude to the guest and can't get away with it. But when she asks if he wants the full story, he just shuts her down. Celia laughs and tells him to chill out, since those guards are just getting punished by their headmaid. Their headmaid is actually a top-tier A-rank adventurer who ditched her old life to work for their family instead. The kid figures A-rankers are probably total beasts, and Celia admits she's terrifying when she's mad even though she loves her husband, especially since he only just finished healing from a serious injury after their huge fight 6 months ago. Since he's an A-rank adventurer, he walked away with nothing but a bruise. It's a total win that they found a nurse for the mistress. Somehow these two are actually... She says she's an open book, but right then, a stunning maid walks up and bows to her mistress. She spots Yuki peeking from behind the mistress and introduces herself as Sophia, the Aquarine family maid. But as Yuki says hi, he can tell right away that she's definitely not. Celia asked if Sophia's husband was doing okay, but Sophia told her things were looking bad since he keeps passing out and needs a long time to recover. Yuki decides he's gonna pray for those guards, while Sophia tells the lady and the young guy she'll give them a tour of the mansion. Celia waves Yuki over and tells him to get over there. He peeks through the door and sees Cecilia wearing a super skimpy outfit. She notices everyone is staring and gets totally caught off. Celia suddenly jumps out of the way while Yuki keeps staring at the girl, so she starts screaming to the whole house about what he's doing. Celia just laughed and joked that her daughter is definitely not a morning person, while the guy lay there totally wrecked, thinking she set him up on purpose because Cecilia's surprise magic blast was just Cecilia finally finishes getting dressed and looks down at Yuki, who's still on his knees. She tells her daughter to just give the guy a break since she looks amazing anyway. Yuki demands to know why she dragged him there, but she just brings up his secret chat with Cecilia. She admits she saw them together, and now Yuki is totally panicking, asking. Celia starts mocking him by repeating that super cringe line about only having eyes for Cecilia while copying his goofy pose, and once Yuki realizes she saw the whole thing, he's so embarrassed he literally. Celia smirks and says it's time to get down to business, and the guy knows exactly what's coming because she's already vented to him about all those annoying marriage proposals, and Celia drops a bombshell that one of the offers came from a hero, making Yuki freak out and ask what that even means. But she just smiles and says the hero has a crush on Cecilia. And when Yuki asks what she said, she tells him she totally rejected it. She tells him to relax, but our hero is way too stubborn to quit. Yuki starts screaming, wondering what's wrong with this guy. He warns him not to fall for her since the team already. Celia flashes a smile and brings up how the guy feels about the hero, mentioning he's totally in love with Cecilia, and then she tells Yuki she's got a question for him. The mom straight up asks him if he wants to marry Cecilia. The girl gets super flustered and begs her mom to quit it, but Cecilia cuts them off and demands a straight yes. Yuki bows her head to apologize, and he totally agrees that the woman's offer is hard to resist. He actually told Cecilia he loved her and got totally rejected, but he's gonna try again once he finally gets his act together. But then she randomly brings up marriage, and he's totally caught off guard. The lady tells him she's heard all she needs to hear. She gives him a smile and says Yuki yells out, asking if she seriously played him again, but she just says it'd be a total nightmare if some pest got close to her daughter, and that she'd much rather. This lady gives him a really sweet look, and Yuki starts to think Celia might actually have a crush on him. After a bit of traveling, our hero finally reaches the creepy Orselski forest. He's only visiting this nightmare of a place because he's got a job to finish. Since joining he's been grinding like crazy ever since he found out this guy has a crush on Cecilia. He's trying his best to act just like him. Now he's on a mission. Yuki's just walking by when the bushes start shaking, and he suddenly senses danger and dives out of the way, landing on his feet to blast the stranger with a magic attack. Suddenly, a headless knight pops up right in front of him and calls Yuki, "Captain," which totally shocks him as he looks at a girl named Duke and remembers she used to work for Dullahan. Cecilia talked him into ditching everything without a single word, and get this, she's actually still alive. The knight sprinted over to the captain, demanding to know where his wings and horns had gone. She kept asking where he'd been hiding them this whole time. Since the demon lord. Duke mentioned that Hapinese and Sheik were totally worried too, which completely shocked Yuki since she didn't even know they were there. So Duke pointed toward their nearby meeting spot and asked Suddenly, a winged girl and a cute guy show up and tell the captain he's actually still alive. One looked like a total angel, with Happy Niz being a harpy and Sheik being a pixie, and both were actually Yuki's loyal subordinates. She collapsed straight into Yuki's arms. He rubbed her head and told her they were still alive. Duke told Yuki to stop worrying about the fact that they were actually dead. The pixie giggles and says that since the heroes' squad beat the Lord, the three of them finally escaped the castle. But Duke was a total crybaby calling for the captain the whole time, making Yuki realize they were thinking about him all along. Duke said she was just too worried about him to stay away, and Hapin agreed they couldn't leave him alone since he randomly snaps and starts shouting total gibberish. Yuki's totally over how these girls look at him, and while the girls in Shik are just hyped they finally tracked him down, they start asking where his captain's horns and wings went. They suddenly charged at the captain, dying to know what the guy had done, while the pixie was just cracking up in the background, and Yuki stayed totally focused, hanging on every word they said. Yuki then drops a bombshell that he confessed to the hero's cute priest and got rejected. And now that he's somehow a human, the girls are just staring at him in total horror. Duke turns to the guy and asks why he's even chasing this girl, especially since his family is going through such a sad situation. He tells them he's just a guy named Yuki now and isn't their captain anymore, so they're finally free to live however they want. Duke shut it down and said the captain stays the boss, and Hepians totally agreed because she didn't want the job either. Yuki tries to deny it, but Duke cuts him off to ask if the priest is actually cute, and after the girls start gushing about her amazing body, Yuki realizes they aren't even listening to him. She starts whispering that the captain is totally in love, so the girls decide they have to meet her right now and demand the guy lead the way. Yuki tells them he's way too busy wrangling chickens to help out, so the girls step up and agree to handle the job. Right then, Heppings shouted that the job was done and it was time to bounce, leaving a massive pile of dead monsters in her wake. Yuki told them if they're gonna talk like that, they better be ready for anything, and the girls were totally down for it. Before long, they looked just like regular people, and even Duke finally got a human head. Duke literally strapped her helmet to her armor so her head wouldn't fall off, and while she was super annoyed by it, he thought she looked awesome without wings, since they could both just hide theirs under their clothes. But things got tricky with Naze because she's a harpy with feathers growing all over her arms and legs, so the guy respected her grit enough to pluck every single one of them off her body. He's totally cool with how things went and has zero regrets, so he heads back to the guild to report the chicken job is done, but then Claim suddenly asks if those three are even Yuki's real friends. Once they all transformed into total hotties, Yuk led the squad straight to Cecilia's mansion. Once they finally got to the mansion, Cecilia straight up told Yuka he was the absolute worst. Heppen started complaining about all the feathers, but Cecilia just gave the priest a hug and told him he was being really sweet. Cecilia gives Yuki a serious reality check, telling him that even if he's trying to act human, he still needs to care about the girl's feelings, and Yuki finally admits he totally messed up and starts feeling the guilt sink in. Cecilia questioned if they were really just Yuki's old subordinates, since they clearly look up to him a ton. And when Duke pointed out how massive the mansion was, she told him the only place bigger is the Demon Lord's palace. Yuki says that's just how it is now. Duke wasn't always like this, though, since Duracons are usually super quiet. She even admitted she used to hate the captain because he... Cecilia was stunned, but Duke explained the captain is a total shut-in who once warned his boss Zakir to leave before he totally lost it. She said she tried to talk sense into the captain a bunch of times, but she eventually got fed up and just ghosted him, which made Cecilia crack up. She heard the rumors and tried to help him out since she worked for him, but she just got wrecked, and that's how she became the person she is today. Yuki remembers being his very first teammate and how he totally changed her life, while Cecilia asks how he even met his other two friends. He starts explaining how he met Pixie Chic and then asks where they disappeared to. He totally freaked out and swore they actually left the room, but even with those disguises on, anything could happen next. Yuki shows up in Sophia and tells Capines she's got the perfect angle, so don't lose it. Then he turns to Sophia and says she's with him. Sophia was totally shocked and asked if she really wasn't the new maid, since she was expecting someone to start today and just assumed it was her. Yuki grabbed Capines in her new outfit and pulled her away from Sophia, who apologized and said the girl would have made a totally awesome maid. Yuki knows she has to find Chic next, and she's freaking out because that little pixie is way too nosy for his own safety. Then he spots a garden through the window and realizes he was stressing for no reason, seeing Chic just chilling on Celia's lap while she pets his head and calls him a poor, lost. The woman turned to Yuki and asked if he really brought both girls, but he just yelled back that they're only friends. Yuki asked if the little guy was being a total pain, but Celia told him she absolutely loves kids and had so much fun playing in the garden with him that he eventually just passed out. After a bit, the guy looks over at the girls to see if they're happy and tells them it's time to head out. He turns back and tells them to stay behind, but Duke shuts that down, saying they're definitely coming, and with Happens and a hyped-up Chic on board, they all officially start living together. But things were just getting started, because the next day the guy showed up at Cecilia's house and ran right into Hepenese, who Sophia had just hired as a maid for Aquarine. The girl waved him goodbye and hoped he'd have a great stay, and Yuki could tell she was actually totally into it. Celia was totally hyped to see him, so she told him where to sit and asked if he'd met the new maid yet. Cecilia asked Yuki what he was up to today because she really wanted him to tag along on her vacation. All those boring meetings about her engagement are totally wearing her out. So, she decides it's finally time to give her a day off. The guy points out that Cecilia is just way. Cecilia's dying to go shopping and wants Yuki by her side the whole time, making him turn bright red as he realizes this is basically an official date. Yuki's super pumped and promises to stay by her side, and Celia just smiles because she totally knew he'd say that. Plus, the carriage is already waiting right outside. Celia mentions Cecilia is waiting for a guy, and when he finally walks out of the mansion, he's totally stunned by how gorgeous she looks. Yuki says sorry for being late and asks if she's been waiting forever. He realizes right then that he's been dying to say those words to her. Cecilia is rocking a brand new. Cecilia said she was totally fine, thinking that if she just called Yuki, he'd come running in a heartbeat. Yuki and Cecilia finally roll into the city, but Yuki's already asking if he really had to change his outfit. Cecilia warns him that if she gets caught, he's in big trouble too. But Yuki promises to make sure everything goes perfectly, making her smile and say she's actually hyped for it. Yuki and Cecilia had an absolute blast shopping all day, and when she tried on a dress she picked out, Yuki was seriously feeling her new look. Cecilia had a total blast today and was super happy with how things went. She's been completely wiped out lately, so she's finally gonna get some much-needed sleep. They spot a cool accessory shop, and just as Cecilia agrees to go inside with Yuki, some random stranger starts watching them. Turns out this person was a hero and a mage. The guy was totally shocked to see it was actually Cecilia. She got super shy and tried to hide her face with her hat. She hissed that they were supposed to be hiding and asked why he was using Cecilia's real name unless he actually wanted her to get caught. The guy finally gets the picture and apologizes to Makana and Cecilia, but Cecilia tells him not to sweat it, so he thanks her for being so chill. Our hero asks what she's even doing there and mentions they're finally taking a break for a walk. Then he flashes a massive grin and asks if she wants to tag along. Yuki's starting to get really mad that the hero is ignoring him, and even though Cecilia rejects him to hang with a friend, the hero just won't stop asking about who. The hero says he'll tag along to the store, so the guy grabs the girl's hand and pulls her away, leaving Makana and Yuki all by themselves. She totally loses it, yelling that their date with the hero is a complete mess, and she looks at him with sad eyes because she worked so hard just to get him to go shopping with her like they used to. Yuki looks back at the past and figures the hero and Makona have been besties since they were little kids, and while this guy looks like a total gambler, is he actually just a dummy? She sees them together and figures they're on a date, so she asks the guy to step up his game so Yuga finally gives up on the priest. She thinks he looks way too gloomy to be any help, so she tells him to tag along since she can't leave them there. But he's about to realize his new partner has a serious. They head inside the shop, and Cecilia calls Yuki to say she's sorry for taking off early. Yuki's barely paying attention and just points out all the decorations, telling the girl he'll buy her whatever she wants. Yuga suddenly jumps right between them and tells the girl he's buying jewelry too, letting Makana and Cecilia pick out whatever they want. Yuki figured the guy was trying to outdo him, but he was only focused on getting the perfect jewelry for Cecilia, and finally found the one piece he knew would look amazing on her. Cecilia slips on the jewelry and tells Yuki he's got awesome taste, showing off a simple pendant with a stone that really shines. Out of nowhere, Yuga barges in to tell Cecilia he picked her jewelry too, and it's seriously huge and super flashy. Yuki realizes this guy is totally unhinged when he picks up a massive rock, and the second Yuga snatches Cecilia's hat to fill it with jewels, McCain and Yuki completely freak out. Everyone's screaming that it's Cecilia, and she's got a hero right next to her, plus McCain is standing there too. The crowd starts crushing everything in sight. McCain screams at Yuga for being a total klutz, and then we meet the hero Cecilia and a girl named Yuki. A bit later, the four of them finally stepped out of the shop. Yuki suggested they wrap things up, and everyone was down for it. But the guy was thinking Yuga was totally gonna. The next day, Yuki heads over to Cecilia's house, but he's met by a super pissed off Celia, and when he finds out Cecilia is sick, he starts totally freaking out. He starts asking if she's okay, but Celia tells him to relax because the girl is just crashed out in her room after all the hype from yesterday. Yuki was totally spiraling and blaming himself for everything. Celia told him to take a breath and stop being so upset. It's just a basic cold, so She asked him to hang out with the girl yesterday, but even though the hero wanted to stay and protect the 6 Cecilias, she just sent him straight home. She tried to say yesterday was just a rough day, but Yuki was still totally freaked out. Celia then mentioned that Cecilia saw the guy trying to cheer the girl up, and now He decides to see Cecilia before he leaves and heads to her room to apologize for totally ruining her day off yesterday. Cecilia tells Yuki he's innocent, but then she flips the script and blames him for everything, leaving him to ask what she even means by that. She blamed Yuki for totally ruining her day off and told him he better step up his game next time. Yuki's face turned bright red as he wondered what it meant that Cecilia was setting him up on another date. Suddenly, the guy jumps up and starts screaming at her to give him everything, yelling that even though yesterday's date was a total disaster, the next one will be perfect if she just waits for him. Sophia kicked him to the curb because she liked her younger mistress way more, but he wasn't about to just shut up and take it. A few days later, Cecilia is totally healed, and once the guy finally chills out, he heads back to the guild to get to work. Clayman was feeling totally hyped and told Yuki he had some big updates to share about his life. The guy mentions his wife has been in a super good mood lately, but Yuki has no clue why he's even stuck listening to this guy talk, while Clayman thinks something awesome happened. Yuki was totally lost in a daydream about marrying Cecilia and seeing her look stunning every single morning, but he got so embarrassed that he started slapping his own cheeks to snap out of it right as Clayman walked in, wondering what the heck all that noise was. Raven strolls into the guild, leaving Yuki totally shocked as he walks right up and points straight toward the exit. Yuki kept quiet because of the massive crowd, but he finally stepped up to finish the job with Raven and asked if there was any cool loot for them. They got a B-rank mission to hunt down a stone dragon, and after Raven tugged on his shirt, Yuki accepted the job right then and there, and they headed out. A bit later, they're cruising in a carriage, and Yuki is totally blown away that Raven actually turned down the order. But once the guy finally agrees, Yuki quickly says sorry for the huge misunder. Turns out Raven just wanted to hit the city with him, so he flashed a grin and said it was all good because he'd never actually done a job with a buddy before. Yuki thinks the guy is actually super sweet, so she tells Raven they should grab a bite with him once they get their food, but they're still gonna take him out before the sun goes down. Raven was totally down with the plan, and it wasn't long before he and Yuki were already deep in the forest. The swordsman wipes out the monsters and tells Yuki that Raven wants to fight him later, but he's totally surprised that Yuki actually took someone's life. Yuki's down for the plan, but she says the dragon has to go first. Suddenly, a dragon shows up, and as Raven tells Yuki to get ready, Yuki notices the beast has super tough skin, so he fires off a spell he's sure will work. The guy punches straight through the dragon's body with a storm punch, while Raven narrowly dodges its massive attack. Yuki lands another hit, and Raven finishes the fight with a clean sword thrust. The kid tells the swordsman he did an awesome job and is hyped they finished so fast, while Raven gives props to. A little later, Yuki and Raven hit up the tavern for a snack, and Yuki finally asks him what's really on his mind. Raven asks Yuki to hear him out, and Yuki tells him he's totally down to listen. Raven actually admits he's in love, and he's looking totally embarrassed about it. Yuki was totally caught off guard, but Raven insisted this was a private talk just for him, making our hero wonder if the guy actually needed some dating tips. He asked Raven what he was really like, and Raven told him the girl wasn't laughing at his voice. She was actually super jealous of it. He gets totally flustered and admits he has no clue what to do, making Yuki think he's acting like a total teenager even though he's such a handsome guy. Yuki thinks Raven is just a handsome guy from the hero's squad, and since he finally got over his voice insecurity, he's waiting for a real answer when he suddenly jumps up and Yuki screams that he's super tall and handsome, and since he's a literal hero, he should just ignore anyone making fun of his weird voice. He tells me to look at him, this totally basic adventurer with a blank face who's been rejected a million times. But he says if the guy just makes a move right now, everything's sao. Yuki tells Raven he needs to start believing in himself, and Raven admits he's totally right. Raven was definitely overthinking it, so he thanks Yuki for the help and decides he's finally confessing to the girl tomorrow. And he even asks Yuki to come along. The next day, our hero meets up with Raven and finds him shaking like crazy from pure terror. Yuki taps the guy on the shoulder and tells him to listen up, asking if Raven is really a knight captain on the hero's team, because that's way too cool for him to. Our hero hyped the guy up, telling him he's totally got this and reminding him how good he looks before wishing him luck. They finally made it to the Aquarine mansion, and Raven thanked Yuki for the help since he could finally tell the girl how he felt before taking off. Yuki just figured out Cecilia is actually Raven's girl, meaning he totally helped his own enemy, and now he's pacing around stressing over what she's gonna do. Raven finally shows back up after a bit. He tells Yuki that he straight up got rejected. She's shocked and says there's no way that's true. He thanks Yuki for all. After that total meltdown, he just bailed and headed home. But Yuki knew that first loss hit him way too hard since he'd been there before, so now he's gotta... Yuki finally catches up with Cecilia, but she tells him Raven never showed up, leaving him totally shocked. As he wonders if she's telling the truth, he suddenly hits a massive realization. Cecilia isn't actually the girl he's in love with. The girl asks what's going on, so Yuki spills the beans, and as Cecilia puts the pieces together, she thinks one of the servants is behind it, making Yuki super hyped while Cecilia. They find Sophia, and she confirms Mr. Raven was just there before asking to see one of the maids. Sophia says he's looking for the new happiness, and just like that, they finally arrive at the spot. Yuki asks if that hot red-haired guy hit on her lately, and after he confessed his feelings, Happiness says she told him it was straight up impossible. Yuki says she's met that swordsman before, so I need her to tell me exactly how it went down. The girl screamed that she couldn't say a word and bolted, so Yuki tried to stop her and yelled that she'd better come back soon. A little later, Yuki speaks up and says he needs to talk through the whole situation with Happiness and Raven. Cecilia's down to help Raven, but she's confused why Duke is even there, so Yuki explains she's known what's going on for a super long time. The girl starts by explaining the whole situation, asking Yuki and Cecilia if they know harpies are the ones being hunted, and they both nod along. Harpies are gorgeous demons, but people are constantly hunting them down and enslaving them just because of their wings. Her happiness didn't last long because she got captured one day, but Duke accidentally saved her, and that's how they ended up becoming friends. That's why Happinies won't be happy with any guy who confesses his love, and Cecilia looked totally crushed while Duke talked about it. Yuki figured Happy Nays actually did okay with Raven, and Cecilia even admitted she was totally jealous of Raven's voice. Duke explains that harpies are obsessed with singing, so she was probably just vibing to Raven's voice, and while Yuki wishes Raven could hear it, the guy decides to swing by the bar. Yuki walks in to find Raven looking totally wrecked on the couch, and even though Raven keeps apologizing for failing him, Yuki tells him it's all good because he's got a huge question. Yuki asks Raven how he met his girl, but Raven gets all emo and asks what Yuki's even gonna do with that info. So Yuki tells him to stop being a quitter and just spill the beans. Raven says he was just wandering the streets thinking everything was normal, until he spotted a girl in an alley with 3 guys trying to pressure her into going for a walk. Raven whips out his sword and points it right at the guys, and the second they try to rush him, he slams them straight in the stomach. The guys were ready to bolt, screaming that this dude is Raven from the Heroes Squad and the captain of the Knights. The guys were totally fuming that they let such a gorgeous girl get away, so they just turned and bolted. Raven X shouted that guys are total savages, but the girl yanked him back and told him his voice actually sounded pretty sweet. The guy was totally shocked and covered his mouth when he realized he had something to say, but then Hepine told him his voice was actually amazing, and she was super jealous, leaving Raven completely confused about. She thanked him for the help and headed out, marking the first time Raven and Happiness ever met. And then he asked Yuki if that was enough for her. Yuki could tell Raven just wanted to be happy, so Raven pulls it out and says he's heading out, but then Duke shows up and starts calling for the captain. She walks right up to Raven and tells him this is the guy who confessed to Happen, and Yuki backs her up by saying she's a friend of his. Zook says Hepinase was injured by a man and asks Raven to heal her, while Yuki suddenly realizes that Duke has been replacing everyone with men, and even though Hepine usually hates guys, Raven says he had no clue, making Duke totally lose it and shout that it would have been way cooler if he just promised to save her, while she just brushes Raven off as a total. The guy snapped and demanded to know what she just said. Duke was also seeing red, and Yuki was doing everything she could to keep them from throwing hands. Duke says they should just start by befriending the Happenants, because that's the perfect way for Raven to help her out. Raven and Duke finally shake hands, and after they trade some quick good lucks and thanks, Yuki realizes he's watching the start of a legendary friendship. The heroes finally pull up to the mansion where Japanese is busy sweeping the yard, and as Raven arrives, Yuki watches from the side and wishes him the best of luck. Hepine spotted the guy, and a super confused Raven actually asked her if they could be friends. She took one look at the guy and totally agreed to be friends with Raven. Finally, everyone was just super happy and vibing, but then Yuki found out Cecilia was actually the one who low-key influenced Japanese's choice. And the best part? Duke officially joined. That's how Yuki ended up moving in with Sheik, and he was always begging the captain to hang out and play. A bit later, Yuki and Sheik hopped into the carriage with Cecilia, and the guy was totally hyped because it was his first time ever riding in one. Sheik was super hyped and called the captain over to the window, while Yuki told Sheikah to chill out, and our main guy just focused on the fact that they were finally heading to Dog. Cecilia's a priest and has to heal people, so the guy tags along to help, but they find Sheik already chilling in the carriage, which makes the guy pout because he totally thought they were leaving him behind. Cecilia laughed and said she was stoked to have Yuki and Sheik along since they'd crushed this job in no time, and Yuki told her she could totally count on them. They finally made it to Dagaz village, where Cecilia told them they'd been jumped by a bunch of bandits. The village chief was totally shocked that Cecilia actually showed up, but she took one look at the disaster and realized it was way worse than she expected, so she told him to get all the injured people together in one place right now. The chief agrees, but then eyes Yuki and Sheik, asking who they are, so the girl tells him they're her friends here to help and that he shouldn't worry because they're actually super strong. The chief bows low and begs the boys to protect them while he goes to round up the rest of the village. Cecilia spends some time patching up the wounded, and as the guy helps out with his own magic, he can tell she's starting to look totally wiped out. This guy is a total fraud, and while a sheik using medicine is one thing, Cecilia's magic is way more draining, so the guy asks her if she needs to take a breather before she says she's totally fine, but then she suddenly collapses, so the guy uses his holy bell magic to save her. He tells the crowd he's sorry, but Cecilia is totally spent and needs to crash, so when he asks for a place to stay, a villager points out an empty house nearby. Yuki tells Sheik they'll settle things later, and after a bit, Cecilia turns her attention toward Yuki. The guy turns around and says it's already finished, but Cecilia just gives him a wicked grin and tells him he knows exactly what she's trying to say. Yuki says sorry for using magic to knock her out, but he had to do it because she was about to collapse from pushing herself way too hard. Cecilia flashed a big smile and thanked Yuki for totally having her back. Yuki was totally blushing because he thought she was super cute, but then some guys showed up and told them about a girl named Till living on the edge of town, asking if they could go check on her too. They tell her the girl isn't hurt, but she's been super sickly since the day she was born, so Cecilia asks for directions, and they point her toward the east side of the village. Eventually, Yuki, Sheik, and Cecilia reach a tiny house at the edge of the village, where a girl asks them who they are. She was just chilling on her bed with a book when she suddenly blurted out that Yuki, Sheik, and Cecilia aren't even locals. Suddenly she starts coughing, and Cecilia apologizes for crashing the place, but the village headman was the one who actually asked them to come. Sheik walks up to the girl and tells her to take the medicine, but Yuki tells Till to relax because Sheik is way smarter than he looks. After a bit, the girl says things finally started getting easier and tells her she's actually super lucky she wasn't there when the bandits raided the village, so he hands her some medicine and Till suddenly flips out and tells him he's totally wrong because the village's guardian god protected her. So Yuki asks which god she's even talking about. She says her grandma told her everything before she passed away, sharing all these crazy stories about him, and she's sure he's the same guy who saved her back then. Till was actually bringing a gift to the guardian god every single day, just like her grandma told her to do. When the bandits finally raided the village, Till was out delivering an offering and actually missed the whole attack because she got sleepy and took a nap on the way back. Sheik is feeling crazy tired and says it's some dark magic at work, and even though Yuki thinks it's a nightmare sleeve, it's actually the same spell that triggers those creepy nightmares. Cecilia warns Yuki that this guardian god is acting super sus, but Tior swears he's totally legit, leaving Yuki to just ask where they can find him. They head straight to the guardian god's temple, where Thiel says the statue is super close, and if they don't believe it, the girl is going to show them the truth. Cecilia, Yuki, and Sheik just stood there frozen, thinking that no matter how you looked at it, that thing was definitely a demon statue. Till screams at them for making fun of the guardian god, but then she starts coughing her lungs out. Cecilia hauls her off, and as Yuki stares at the statue, he tells Sheik there's no way this thing is a guardian god, while Sheik points out it's actually way more like. Yuki points out that these aren't guardian gods at all, but actually look like gargoyles, which are trap statues straight from the Demon King's castle. Suddenly, the statue's eyes glow as it springs to life and lunges at Yuki and Sheikah, but Yuki isn't even surprised because he totally saw this coming. He asks what kind of god he is if he's really just a demon. Then he looks over at Sheik only to realize she's totally vanished. Out of nowhere, this scary-looking guy pops up right in the demon's face and nails it with a massive kick to the head, and she's totally hyped that he actually won. Sheik asks Yuki what they're gonna do with the demon, then turns to the gargoyle to see if it can talk. But the demon just screams for them to go ahead and kill him. The kid tells the demon he just wants to talk, but the gargoyle is totally shocked they aren't there to kill him, so Yuki has to remind him that he's the one who started the fight. The gargoyle bows and says sorry for being rude since he heard they recognized him. So Yuki tells him to forgive them too and asks why he calls himself the guardian god. The demon thinks it's finally time to tell the guys the truth about how he showed up hundreds of years ago to protect the temple. Back then, he was a total slacker who just slept all day, making Sheik crack up since he's basically a clone of Captain Yuki, but the gargoyle kept going and said that they snatched him right out of the castle while he was fast asleep, and she just started cracking up like it was the funniest thing ever. The second the demon realized what was up, he burst out of the cart and nearly wrecked those thieves. But since he'd never left his temple before, he was totally lost and couldn't find his way back. He was just wandering around until he stumbled onto this village. The thugs who brought him there started raiding the place, so he totally wrecked them. And she just couldn't stop laughing. Once he got his revenge and chilled out, he moved into the temple where the locals started calling him a god, but Yuki knew he was really just a simple demon. The gargoyle says people eventually started seeing him as a guardian god, and now this one super frail girl comes by all the time to clean the temple. He realized bandits were attacking, so to show his thanks, he quickly hid the girl where they couldn't find her. Yuki asked if he'd messed with Till, but the demon told her to quit talking crazy, and claimed he hadn't done a thing besides hitting her with a nightmare spell while she was out cold. He's finished his story, and now he's asking me to give him the lowdown on those boys. He just laughed and told Yuki his life was way more of a mess because that demon had actually fallen for a human. Yuki snaps that it's not funny and mocks the demon for acting like a lost kid, but she just keeps laughing until he tells her to drop it and asks if the demon is actually about. The gargoyle says no way, and decides to just chill in the temple without helping or hurting anyone, so Yugi's totally fine with that, and tells Sheik they're heading back. A little while later, Yuki and Sheik finally made it back to Till's house, where Cecilia tucked the girl into bed and told Yuki they did an awesome job before asking if they actually learned anything. Yuki checks if Till is actually out cold before mentioning that the guardian god is just a gargoyle, and since the demon in town has been chilling for hundreds of years, he's sure everything will. Cecilia's not convinced it's that easy, and since things are getting way too heavy, Sheik decides it's time to bail and go grab some food. Yuki hands Sheik the cash for some fire food, and Sheik is basically glowing with hype as they head back out. He thinks they should hang on to the gargoyle for a bit while they patch up the villagers and deal with the bandits, and since Cecilia totally agrees, they decide to focus on healing everyone first. Till was totally zonked out on the bed, and Yuki said it was time to go, but they had to be super quiet so they didn't wake her. They head outside and Yuki's totally feeling the romantic vibe under that huge full moon. Cecilia starts grilling him about what exactly went down. Yuki gets all flustered and tries to play it. The next morning, Yuki told Cecilia and Sheikah their mission was to grill the locals about the gargoyle while they were treating them. Cecilia locked in and announced the treatment was finally starting, telling everyone to get in line right now. The guys instantly snapped into a line right in front of Cecilia. Yuki knows exactly what these guys are after, and just then, he hears someone thanking Shikaku. He spins around to see a massive crowd of girls swarming Sheik, and realizes the guy is a total legend with the ladies. The guy only gathered the old folks around him, and they were all super thankful he actually saved them. Yuki got straight to the point and asked about the guardian god, and the locals asked if he meant that creepy demon statue hidden deep in the woods. Our hero realizes he knows this statue and remembers that Teal used to worship her like crazy. He wondered why she was so obsessed with this god, And it turns out Till used to clean the statue and leave gifts there until Red Fang totally ambushed her one day. Back when Till was only 7, she was so sick she thought it was game over, but then the guardian god statue stepped in to save her. But nobody actually buys it, and since everyone's way too creeped out to even go near the statue, Yuki finally realizes why Till is so obsessed with worshipping the thing. Cecilia eventually apologized, saying she got hit with so many questions that she totally missed her chance to ask about the gargoyle. Yuki's ready to wreck the creeps who messed with her, but she tells him to chill since her treatment was just running late, then asks if he's found any info yet. Yuki spills everything to Cecilia, who explains the gargoyle hasn't hurt a soul, and it turns out the locals actually think the big guy is totally chill. Cecilia wants to talk to him just to be safe, so Yuki tells Shik to go visit Till, and the guy is totally down for it. A little while later, Cecilia and Yuki find the gargoyle, and the demon is totally ticked off, asking if they've really been snitching on him. The girl introduces herself as Cecilia Bosun, and explains she's only there to heal the villagers after those bandits trashed the place. The demon realizes she's the exact girl Yuki mentioned. The girl asked if he was actually going to leave the village alone, and the demon snapped that he already told her he's got zero interest in attacking the place since he literally just lives there. Cecilia realizes everything is going down exactly like she heard. Then Yuki speaks up and asks the gargoyle if it's actually into cute girls. The gargoyle was totally confused, and that's when Yuki realized this world didn't even have a word for it. The gargoyle demands to know what that word means, so Yuki tells him it's actually from his old world. Once the gargoyles finally heard the whole story, the demon started screaming that he'd never do something like that, especially not for some puny humans. The gargoyle snapped at the guy, telling him to stop giving him that look. He tells them he's heading to bed since they're done talking, and the others are way too scared to tell the girl what he actually looks like. On their way back to the village, Cecilia asked Yuki if he was the one who usually looked after the kids. Yuki just smiles and tells Cecilia to chill because she's the only one he loves, making her super flustered as she begs him to stop. But he cuts her off to say they need to get back to Shika and Till right now. Till eventually told Sheka to hold on, and even though she was super hyped to talk about the guardian god, she suddenly got really upset and started crying. Till gripped the guy's hand, smiling through her tears as she begged the captain to save him, while Yuki just stood there in total silence, watching it all go down. Till begged them to stay and listen to her stories too, but Yuki just scratched his head and apologized, saying they had to head home since they had a super early start tomorrow. Cheek was screaming and crying at the captain, but the guy just told him to make sure he was back in time for dinner. A little later, Yuki and Cecilia were heading home when he said yeah, and promised Till would have a total blast. Then Yuki grabbed Cecilia by the crayfish and warned her to watch out in the dark, so she thanked him and agreed. Cecilia caught Yuki's eye, making him blush and look away, so they both just smiled and walked home in the most awkward silence ever. It was the dead of night and our guy was totally passed out in his guest house. He snaps awake as the village chief bursts in, begging for help and screaming that bandits are raiding the town. Yuki suddenly leaped out of bed and told Shika to get moving, but the guy was totally wiped and mumbled that he'd only just fallen asleep. Swords are clashing all over the place as the villagers go head-to-head with the bandits. Cecilia rushed straight over to him, her guard totally up and ready for anything. Yuki calls Cecilia and tells her the villagers are trying to fight back, but they're so badly hurt that they won't be able to stop the attack. Sleepy Sheik walks up to the duo, so Yuki tells him to pack his gear and asks Cecilia for backup, and she's totally down as she rushes off with him. Sheka Yand and City took off, and then the kid pulled off a slick jump to get right behind the bandit. The guy whipped around and snapped, demanding to know what kind of kid he was. Out of nowhere, she leaps up and smashes the bandit right in the head with a massive mid-air kick. The other guys spotted him, but they didn't even have time to react before this girl totally wiped out most of the bandits. Cecilia was totally blown away by how insanely strong Sheik actually was. Yuki flexed about how his crazy speed leaves enemies totally confused, then revealed that the kid is actually his subordinate. Then our guy basically said it's finally time for him to lock in and get to work too. Cecilia fired up her magic and told the guy she totally had his back. He realized he couldn't just drop a massive magic attack in this spot. Yuki fires off a storm drill spell and skewers the guy who was attacking the young man. He spins around and sees smoke pouring out of Till's house. Our hero tells Sheik to bolt over to Till's house since they can handle the fight themselves, So Sheik gives a quick nod and starts hauling. Our hero finally catches his breath and wipes the sweat away while the villagers go wild cheering because those bandits are finally toast. It didn't take long for Yuki to realize that Sheik still hadn't come back. She thought she'd finally ditched those bandits, but when Cecilia walked up to Yuki, she couldn't figure out why he was acting so intense until he told her he had a total bad vibe. He bolted straight for Teal's place while Cecilia shouted after him. Yuki sprints to the scene and can't believe his eyes. Till is clutching a hurt gargoyle while Sheik jumps in to shield them from some dude with a sword. His eyes went wide with total shock, and even though he tried to ask what was happening, I was completely speechless. This mysterious dude spins around and with a massive ego asks what the heck is going on. He thought Yuki and Cecilia were just random villagers, but then he spotted the girl and realized he actually knew her. Cecilia recognized the guy too, but Sheik suddenly lunged at the stranger to attack, only for the man to block with his sword and tell Sheik to knock it off. Then this random guy shoves the kid and starts screaming right in his face. He got sent flying right into a tree, and the heroes immediately started screaming his name. Yuki saw how mad the guy was, but he grabbed his shoulder and told him to knock it off. Yuki told everyone to chill out and asked what the heck happened here. Sheik explained the gargoyle was just protecting Till from bandits, but right then, he got totally blindsided from behind. The guy was totally shocked and asked what was wrong with slaying demons, since he thought he'd already finished him off and the person in charge really needed to teach him some manners. She started shaking and sobbing, so the guy asked what was wrong and told her to just keep quiet. Out of nowhere, Yuki just lunges at this guy. Right in the middle of the fight, he realized his magic had totally vanished, and he was completely caught off guard. Cecilia screamed at Yuki to stop because his magic wasn't doing anything to this guy. Yuki straight up asked Cecilia if she actually knew who this guy was. Cecilia explains that this guy is Meera, a hero from the Gareth Empire, and since his sword is the magic absorber, it literally eats magic, which is exactly why he can't use that attack. Yuki stopped talking right away to ask if there were other heroes out there, and the girl explained that they're actually from different kingdoms. Cecilia explains that every kingdom has heroes, but they're the only ones who actually reached the Demon Lord's castle, though Yuki thinks he just didn't have the full story. Since the Empire built this magic absorber, it's packed with all kinds of crazy skills, and they're even making magic swords, spears, and hammers too. But right then, the guy looks. He swung his sword and yelled at them to just finish the job already. Yuki told Meera to hold up, explaining that the gargoyle was just protecting Till and wouldn't actually hurt anyone. The guy asked Yuki what he was even talking about since he was busy just taking out demons. Cecilia looked right at Yuki and told him he totally lacked the pride of a real hero. Yuki finally gets that being a hero means you need a real reason to slay demons, while Meera thinks following the guild's orders sounds like a total drag. He just wanted to take that demon out for good, and he had this totally wicked smirk on his face while doing it. The guy kicks the register away, but she grabs his leg and refuses to let go, doing everything she can to protect her guardian god. The guy snaps that Till is just getting in his way, so he's totally fine with killing her too. Cecilia begs him to wait a second. She calls him out, asking if the guy just smirks and says he has no clue, but he'd definitely step up if he felt like it. Then he points his sword right at Cecilia and asks if the ocarine. Yuki grabs Cecilia by the shoulder and pulls her away, and she turns back to call out his name. The guy stares Yuki down and asks if he's actually serious about fighting, calling him a total redneck with a huge, smug grin. Yuki stares at the young man and then at Mr. Gargoyle, thinking the poor guy looks like a total mess now that his arms and wings have been sliced off. He looked at the crying victims, and after seeing him point a sword at Cecilia, the hero knew he was never going to forgive this guy. He tells him to get ready because he's about to show him what hell really looks like. Yuki Veen lets her magic fly, but the guy just laughs and tells her it's totally useless before he holds up his sword and sucks all her power right into the blade. Grint just smirked and said he was only saying hello, but when he launched another spell, the kid's sword sucked the magic right up. He smirked and reminded Yuki that his magic was totally useless, asking if he'd finally pick up a weapon, but Yuki just grinned and said that unfortunately, magic is the only thing he can use. The guy swings his sword and brags that Yuki is going down, sending sharp blades flying at them, but our hero jumps in and uses his magic to keep Cecilia safe. He loved that his girlfriend was worried about him, but he had to move fast before Cecilia and the others got hurt. He cranks up his magic even more and dares the guy to see if he can actually handle absorbing it. The guy holds his sword out and grits his teeth, realizing the magic is so insane that his blade is already starting to crack. Out of nowhere, Yuki pops up and decks the guy, telling him he's finally been caught. The guy blacks out, and Yuki just smirks, saying he really shouldn't have messed with such a powerful him. Cecilia tells Yuki he's awesome, but asks if they really had to end up in this position, and Yuki explains that he's a totally different person once his switch gets flipped. He looks down at the guy and hopes he's okay, but Cecilia says he isn't hurt that bad and will be back on his feet in just 2 or 3 days. The guy Yuki just wrecked finally wakes up and hurls a sword straight at the gargoyle, but Yuki doesn't see it coming until it's way too late. The sword zoomed right for the gargoyle's head, but Till suddenly jumped in front of the demon who blocked the hit for him. The blade rips right through Till's and she blacks out as she falls, but Yuki catches her and desperately tries to pull the sword out, thinking he's totally failed to save her. Cecilia rushed over to Yuki and immediately started using her healing magic. The gargoyle turned to her, totally stunned, and asked why she'd sacrifice herself like that. Tull replied that he'd saved her life so many times, so she finally wanted to say. Right then, the guy stood up and yelled that Till interrupted him again, totally shocked that his magic absorber actually broke. He flashed a grin and said today was a total blast, so he's letting everyone slide this time. But Yuki just glared at him and asked if he really thought he'd get off that easy. The guy just laughs and tells Yuki he's being a total idiot. Then, he summons a bow made of pure wind and fires a bunch of arrows right into the clouds. This is how he triggers. Yuki realized he was in big trouble, so he used his magic to blast every last arrow out of the sky. Yuki scanned the area but didn't see a soul, so he just turned and bolted. Yuki apologized to Cecilia for being so thoughtless, but she told him to stop because she couldn't do anything to help either. Yuki grit his teeth, feeling like a total loser because he thought his buff body and infinite magic cheats would make everything a piece of cake. He's realizing he's not the big shot he thought he was, staring at the gargoyle, Sheikah, and Cecilia, until everything suddenly shifts. Yuki turned to Cecilia and asked if the villagers were really staying away, and she told him she didn't think they'd show up at all. Suddenly, wings burst out of Yuki's back and a horn sprouted from his head, leaving Cecilia totally terrified because he looked just like a demon. He promised he'd catch up and destroy the whole world, making the girl shake in pure terror. But Yuki just gave her a gentle smile and told her not to sweat it because he was only going to rough him up a bit. Cecilia looked totally unsure as Yuki told her to watch over Till while he was gone, and then she just stood there watching him fly away into the sky. This guy chased his dreams across the globe, tugged on his scarf, and decided it was the perfect move. Yuki spots her target wandering through the woods, and the second he hits the ground, Meera whips around in total shock. He shuts up, wondering where this new demon even came from, when suddenly Yuki just vanishes right before his eyes. Mary had no idea where the demon disappeared to until she saw his head pinned to the ground right by the Yuki River. Yuki jumps back as Meera asks what he's doing. Then he stares down a creepy guy and asks if he's really the one who hacked off his subordinates' arms and wings. He totally lost it and screamed that the kid deserved to die for what he did to his loyal servant. Meera laughed and said it'd be a struggle, but he just had to kill the demon. Then he lunged straight at Yuki, who didn't even flinch until the very last second. Yuki snaps his eyes open and blasts Meera away with a kick so hard it sends him crashing straight through the trees. The guy cleared his throat and asked why there were still such powerful demons running around if the Demon King was already dead. Yuki walks right up and calls him a total weakling, but he knows he's not just some normal guy anymore. He's a straight-up dangerous demon. Meera snatches up a dagger and starts swinging at the demon. He sees the attack coming and just steps aside, wondering if this kid really thought he could kill him while moving that slow. Yuki snatched the guy's arm, and he immediately realized he was totally done for. Our hero blasted Meera with a massive fire spell, hitting him with everything he had to knock the fight right out of him. Yuki grabs the guy by his collar and blasts off into the sky, and when Meera asks where he's taking him, Yuki just says the dude isn't even worth dying by his hands. They hit a wild, rushing river. Meera screams that it's impossible, and he loses it, yelling that he's gonna end that damn demon once and for all. Yuki just let go, and Meera started plummeting straight into the deep water. Yuki figured this river flowed straight to the Garrus Empire, so if the guy got lucky, he'd finally be heading home. Yuki's creepy form finally fades away and he's back to normal, saying it's time to go find Cecilia, but first he's got to rip out that rock and those wings, even though he knows it's gonna hurt like crazy. After tossing Meera into the river, Yuki headed back to Cecilia, who was totally freaking out because he looked like a straight-up demon. He actually hates being in this form because he's just trying to live his life as a guy named Yuki. By the next morning, Till actually pulled through and was totally healed. Maybe because of some crazy magic or just because that gargoyle never let go of his hand. Sheik was totally crushed after that loss, but Yuki's hoping that Duke, Happens, and Cecilia can help him get his head back in the game once they get back. Today's the day they finally hit the road, so they've got to say their last goodbyes to Teal and the rest of the crew. Out of nowhere, a scream rips through Till's house, and Yuki kicks the door open, shouting her name at the top of his lungs. Till woke up totally stoked that the guardian god actually visited her house, but she immediately started apologizing for the mess and tried to leave until the gargoyle told her to get back in bed because she wasn't healed yet. Cecilia and Yuki saw the whole thing go down as the gargoyle barked at Till to hit the floor right that second. He begged Cecilia and Yuki for help since things were only getting worse for the girl. Then, Till looked at the guardian god and said she had one tiny request. She just wanted him to call her. The gargoyle agrees and calls her by name, telling her to just lie down and rest, and she starts freaking out with joy because she's so happy she could literally die right now. Tilla finally apologized for her attitude since Yuki and Cecilia actually showed up at her place, but Cecilia told her not to sweat it because they were totally cool. Feel says she's stoked they're here because she really needs to talk, and when Yuki asks what's going on, she asks if they can take her and the guardian god all the way to Minerva. The gargoyle was totally shocked by her request, but she just bowed again and explained that since regular healing magic wouldn't work on the guardian god, they had to find help in Minerva. Yuki figured it'd be a total breeze to get the scoop on Minerva, so he asks Cecilia what she thinks about the whole thing. She keeps it real and says it's impossible since Till is still recovering and sneaking a gargoyle into the city is a total nightmare. But Yuki tells Cecilia he's already got a plan. Yuki finally breaks down his plan for the group, and after thinking it over, Cecilia admits that this might actually work out perfectly. Yuki says everything's cool, so Till starts celebrating and jumps right onto the gargoyle's neck, yelling about how awesome this is, but the gargoyle tells everyone to hold on because he hasn't actually said yes yet. The demon got super embarrassed and agreed, while Yuki and Cecilia watched and whispered that the gargoyle just can't say no to Till. With the chores finally finished, Cecilia, Till, and Sheik hit the road, and even though it had only been a week, they were definitely gonna miss this place. Cecilia spotted Yuki loading a statue onto the carriage, and when she asked him what it was, he told her it was a gargoyle. He used his magic to turn the gargoyle into a statue, and now Teal is moving into the Aquaron mansion to live and work. Celia told her not to push herself too hard, but Yuki turns to Celia and says he wants to keep the statue at their mansion, but she gives him a hard no. She told Yuki that if he wanted to keep the statue, it had to look amazing, and while he totally agreed, he knew Teal wasn't the type to beg for a gargoyle, so Duke finally kicks the door down, and Ace bursts in right next to Yuki as they both start shouting for the captain. Duke burst into the room and asked the guy where the jerk who upset her was, while Yuki was totally freaked out by the girls showing up out of nowhere. They looked totally terrifying as Duke promised to take the guy out, and he made it clear it was going to be super brutal. Yuki held up his hands to stop the girls and demanded to know who leaked the secret to them. Everyone was hyped to celebrate Sheik being back, but he was actually miserable and decided to tell them the whole truth himself. Yuki told everyone to just chill because he'd already handled it, breaking a few of their bones and dumping them right into the river. Duke tells the captain he's being way too soft, insisting they snap every bone in the guy's body before tossing him into the ocean, and while Happens agrees he needs to be totally crushed, Yuki is just begging them in her head to stop being so savage. He bragged about already trashing the guy, so the young man asked about the girl's job, but Duke promised they'd be back fast while Yuki freaked out and screamed. Duke started snapping at the captain because he was so worried, but Yuki knew that trying to talk sense into him was a total waste of time. He's sure Cecilia is the only one who can fix this, since she can totally calm him down and would never ditch him while he's feeling so down. Duke made it official, and when Yuki said they should trust Cecilia, Hapennies was totally on board. Duke suddenly switched the topic to the captain, but the girl was dying to ask him what was going on as she pointed her finger right at the statue. She finally admitted the statue was super creepy and didn't fit the room at all, so Duke offered to toss it, totally relieved he could finally call it total junk. The gargoyle heard every single word and started shaking with pure rage, finally revealing his true form while admitting he actually hated this look too. Duke instantly pulled her sword while Happen started prepping a spell, but Yuki screamed for them to stop because if they broke anything, who was going to pay the bill? Yuki and the gargoyle caught each other up on everything. Then Duke finally said sorry for yanking out that sword, and she revealed she's actually a Dullahan while Happy Niz is a... The gargoyle says he doesn't have a name but is stoked to meet the girls, and since Duke thinks that's a total hassle, Hapini decides to call him Gaius. Duke thought the name sounded super manly and cool, and since the gargoyle was chill with whatever they called him, Yuki was hyped that they were all becoming friends so fast. Duke asks Guy if the captain really did this to him, calling it totally messed up, and while Happy thinks it's just trashy, Guy admits he agrees but is completely powerless to stop it. Yuki was just about to lose his cool and tell the guys to quit it, but a sudden knock at the door made him whip around and blast Guy with magic. Sophia bursts into the room and says Happings is actually there, reminding her that she was told to look after the new girl yesterday. The girl gave Hepping a scary look and snapped that she didn't have time for games, but she was actually shaking with fear. Then Sophia just hauled Hepping away while the girl started begging. Sophia turned to Yuki and said sorry for being a total pest, but then she immediately asked what the deal was with that statue. Raven suddenly pops up behind Sophia and tells Duke he's heading to Daga village to hunt those bandits today, so he's just been waiting for him to show up. Raven told Yuki he should totally join their mission if he was free, and Yuki just waved back and said he was in. Sophia turned to the group and told them she was totally over that statue and they should just toss it in the trash. Guy turned to the kid and asked what he'd been transformed into this time, and Yuki just said he thought a sphinx was a cool choice. He realizes he's actually been reborn in this world, and suddenly everything looks way more beautiful than before. He tells Guy he's heading straight to the guild since it's been forever. Yuki eventually makes it to the Adventurers Guild, but when he realizes Claim isn't there, he turns to the receptionist to ask what's going on. The girl recognizes him right away and says he's the guy who's always talking to the Vice Guild Master, but Yuki is totally confused and asks her who she even means. Yuki was totally thrown off when she said it again. This guy was constantly talking to Clayman, a Vice Guild Master. She asked if he was okay, and he apologized, saying he just didn't think Claymon looked anything like a Vice Guild Master. The receptionist just laughed and said she totally gets him. But even so, Clement always gets the job done perfectly. She joked about the whole guild taking a vacation during the hero parade, so he worked for 3 days straight, and that's when Yuki realized he had just arrived in the city. Yuki asked her what went down with the claim today, but she leaned in and whispered that it was a guild secret she couldn't just shout out. She heard the rumors and got into a massive fight with his wife. He's been stuck in the hospital for a whole month now, and Yuki was absolutely blown away. A bit later, Clement is sitting on his hospital bed asking Yuki why he even showed up. So Yuki hands him some snacks and explains he's only in the ward because of their fight, leaving Clement wondering what he actually did. Clement blamed the whole fight on their wedding anniversary, and Yuki figured he just totally blanked on her. The guy snapped and said he remembered her, but buying a gift was such a massive pain that he just kept putting it off. It was their anniversary, so he spent the whole day panicking to find a gift. But night fell fast, and when he finally got home, her face looked absolutely terrifying. Yuki screams that this is all Clement's fault, and he better apologize to his wife right now, but Clemens just says she isn't mad anymore, and he'll head home once he's done with work. Grind teased him about being jealous of his wife's care, and Yuki went dead silent as he suddenly remembered Celia telling him it took Sophia's husband 6 months to recover after their huge fight. Yuki asks Clement what his wife does for work, and he finds out she's actually the head maid at the mansion. Yuki asks if Clement's wife is named Sophia, which totally catches the guy off guard, but Yuki explains he met the maids through a girl he knows from the Aquarain family. Yuki asks how Clement and Sophia met, and Clement is super hyped that anyone cares about their romance, so he agrees to spill the beans, starting with the fact that by the time he turned 18, he was already a top-tier A-rank solo adventurer. But because everything was so easy, He was honestly just bored out of his mind. Suddenly, a girl reached out her hand and told him he was finally free, and that girl was Sophia. She told him he looked super strong and invited him to join her squad, while Claim was busy thinking about how gorgeous she was. He was super drunk and tried to go in for a hug, but Sophia totally destroyed him before he even knew what hit him. He was in total shock that this girl just wrecked him so easily. Right after that, he asked to join her squad, and together they were seriously overpowered. Clayman called them the invincible and emotionless couple, and while Yuki thought that name was super weird, the guy said that's just what everyone calls them. They didn't admit it at first, but slowly, they started catching major feelings for each other. Sophia looked absolutely stunning whenever they were together, and since he was finally loving life for the first time, he decided to pop the question. After finishing their meal, Clayman pulled out a ring and popped the question, and since it was a total dream, Sophia said yes. The second he opened his mouth again, she totally lost it and beat him so bad he was stuck in the hospital for 6 whole months. Sophia was begging to be an adventurer, and even though he was just scared she'd get hurt, he finally managed to talk her out of it. But only after she totally wrecked him. Yuki reveals that they're finally married and living their best life together. Climon is totally hyped and celebrates the amazing news. But suddenly, the hospital door swings open and Sophia walks right. Sophia spots Yuki and asks what he's doing there, so he just grins and says he ran into Clayman at the guild and wanted to check up on him. The guy was grinning like crazy because his wife finally showed up to check on him. Sophia boots the guy in the head and demands to know which lover he's talking about. Then Claim lets go of his head as Sophia mentions the guy always uses her first name. Makshina straight up admitted he saw under her skirt, and she actually said he was right. Yuki was totally shocked, but Sophia just looked at him and said Claymon was her husband, so everything was actually cool. She helps the guy up, gives Yuki a quick bow, and says they're heading out while thanking him for stopping by to see her husband. A bit later, he gets back home and starts thinking about those happy couples again, so he gets super jealous and squeezes his pillow, wishing he could just see Cecilia right now. The next day, Yuki was totally wiped out on his bed, and Guy, who was chilling as a sphinx statue, told him to knock it off because he was getting super annoying. Yuki turns to Gaius, who tells him straight up that if he wants to see the girl, he should just go to her. He's dying to get to her, but he's totally stuck. Cecilia's job is way more intense than this guy realized, so he can't just walk up to her. Right then, the dude was actually casting a spell. Guy told him he needed. Yuki still turned that gargoyle into a total masterpiece, and he thought the statue looked absolutely fire, while Guy even asked if the kid was actually just messing with him. Suddenly, a knock hits the door and it's Cecilia asking if he's home, which totally shocks Yuki the second he hears her voice. He yelled that he was finally home and told them to hang on, but then he spotted Cecilia and the total chaos going down behind her, while she was just super hyped to see him. Yuki was hyped to see Cecilia, but then he noticed Happens was tagging along too. The girl asked why he was staring, so Cecilia apologized for the surprise visit and asked if they were getting in his way. He told them they weren't bothering him one bit, and since Cecilia showed up all by herself, he knew today was going to be awesome. So the girls finally headed into the room to meet. The girls head into Yuki's room. Happy Knees starts snooping around everywhere. Yuki is totally confused by her weird behavior. Then, out of nowhere, Happy Knees asks where the Gargi. Yuki pointed right at the statue and told everyone this was the spot. Happy Knees glared at Yuki and told him his work was straight up trash, but he had no clue why she hated it so much. Yuki asks Cecilia what she thinks and she totally panics, but even after he says he thinks it looks great, she just tells him the statue is super weird. Yuki thought they were all fans, but he quickly realized art is a total struggle, and everyone totally misunderstood him yet again. Yuki quickly changes the subject and asks the girls why they're even hanging out today. Cecilia says it's their day off, so they head out for a walk, and even though she's worried about bugging Yuki and Guy, he tells her it's totally fine. Cecilia mentions she's been hanging around their place non-stop lately, asks if he's doing all right, and then plops down on the bed right next to Yuki. The MC admits Cecilia already knows the truth and they owe her big time, making Yuki panic that she messed up. But Cecilia says it's all cool while her mom leads the guy right. Cecilia gets totally confused and asks if she's being kidnapped, but Yuki just says it's fine since it's her and they're basically neighbors anyway. Yuki asks if Sheik is finally feeling better, but Cecilia admits she's been way too busy to know, right until Hephanes interrupts and says she's got all the answers. Celia could tell the sheikh was acting way different, so as soon as she got to the manor, she straight up asked him what happened. She was a total natural and had literally never lost to anyone. Losing for the first time left him totally crushed and confused, but Celia held him close while he finally let out everything he'd been holding inside. He cried until he fell fast asleep, and after he started crashing at the manor, he actually started feeling a whole lot better. Cecilia grinned and talked about how awesome her mom is, and since she's a healer too, she totally looks up to her, while Yuki realized that Cecilia was the one who truly fixed Sheikah. Happy Nays mentions that Cecilia actually healed the girl's heart, and Yuki snaps that she should have said that sooner so she wouldn't sound like a total kidnapper. Yuki catches Cecilia totally off guard by bringing up Sheik, and he even points out how she's been getting way closer to her mom lately. He's totally sure she's got this, and Cecilia just smiles and nods along. Then he switches gears and says his buddy just got out of the hospital yesterday, and it turns out he's actually the husband of Sophia, the head maid at Cecilia's place, which totally shocks. Yuki clenches her fist in total frustration, thinking about how he's already married and living his best life while she's just stuck there being super jealous. Cecilia just smirked and said she'd already heard the news about Sophia going to see her husband. He actually ended up in the hospital after she totally wrecked him, but since Sophia spent their anniversary all alone, he got a fat paycheck for the trouble. Cecilia asks Hephanes if she's spotted the head maid today, and she says she did, but it was honestly super creepy. She starts shaking and says Sophia was smiling, and even though the guy thought she was doing fine, what was it about that look that totally terrified Happy Nays? Yuki is totally over Clayman and Sophia's mushy love stories and wants to hear about their epic days as adventurers instead, so when Cecilia mentions her mom told her all about it, he begs her to spill every single detail. Cecilia kicks things off by telling the story, taking us back to before Sophia and Clayman were even a couple, when Sophia always felt super awkward about putting teams together. She'd joined a ton of different squads before, but they were all a total disaster, constantly picking fights with her and breaking up over the dumbest things. They were sent on some super dangerous missions where her friends got totally wrecked, leaving Sophia feeling crushed by guilt every single day. Clayman wouldn't stop complaining about everything, but he still stayed glued to her side the whole time. One day, Sophia told him they should just call it quits if he was so annoyed, but Clayman was totally shocked and said he only hated the mission, not her, so he wasn't. Right then and there, Sophia totally fell for Clayman, leaving Yuki face-palming at the cheesy romance while Cecilia just started giggling. Then she remembered that while Clayman just sat there, a bunch of guys were totally harassing Sophia because she was way too nice to fight back. Clayman suddenly cut them off to ask what the plan was, scratching his head as he pointed out that other guys were already hitting on the girl. One line out. The input is 3 sentences. Does that mean 3 lines out? Asterisk. Input. 1. He called Sophia to go to another bar, as there was nothing he could. This random guy grabs her shoulder, but Sophia blasts him with a massive spin kick that sends him flying across the bar, leaving everyone totally terrified of what this duo can really do. Ever since that day, everyone saw them as the ultimate power couple, and even though Clayman's day was a total disaster, he told Sophia at the next bar that every second with her was worth more than anything. Yuki grabbed his head, totally done with those annoying love stories, while Cecilia just gave a super awkward laugh. The girl noticed Happiness was fast asleep, and while the guy wondered when she even snuck onto the bed, Cecilia said it was time to head out and shook her away. Cecilia announces they're heading out and tells Yuki he definitely isn't saying no to a trip to Clarence Castle, and even though he's totally confused, she just says she's counting on him and takes off. A few days later, our guy finally heads to the castle and is totally blown away by how massive the place is. Yuki asks why they were brought to this castle, and Cecilia tells him she's finally ready to spill the beans. Yuki saw that big smile and knew the old guy was finally back. Then Cecilia brought up how the 3 of them went to Dagus village, which Yuki confirmed was true, and taking down bandits and healing the locals is totally fine, and since she didn't say a word about other guys, Yuki's convinced the real problem is that trash hero from another country. Yuki sees Shik looking worried, so he gives him a reassuring head pat to cheer him up. Shik just smiles and says he's totally fine now. He decides right then that he's going to get way stronger so he never loses to anyone again. Plus, He promised Celia that once he levels up, he's gonna go all out and crush that hero, making her giggle while Yuki just gave an awkward smile and wondered why that guy had such a weird look on his face. Cecilia sighs and admits Yuki was right about that Garrus Empire hero spying on them, but the real problem is the crazy way they actually took him down. The official story says they used a bunch of weapons to corner him and toss him in the river, and now the girl is handing Yuki the report so he can see it for himself. The report mentions a magic-eating sword, making it obvious the girl didn't win alone, so the castle summoned them because they're definitely suspicious. Yuki says they've got to keep quiet, but their real problem is the guy she and Cecilia just turned on, and Sheik is just standing there totally clueless why they're staring. Cecilia's totally panicking and telling Sheik to watch his back, while Yuki warns him to stay low and not cause any drama, and Sheik just nods like he's got it all under control. Refining for engaging YouTube narrator vibe. Asterisk. A bit later, the trio finally makes it to the royal castle for a meeting, where they meet a guy named Prince Clarence Alter. Yuki, Sheik, and Cecilia were all kneeling before the king, but he just laughed and told them to stop being so stiff and just talk to him normally. Sylvia stood right by the king and told him to act like a real ruler, but the prince just laughed and told her to stop being such a buzzkill. Yuki remembers hearing that the third prince was a total genius who won massive wars at 15 and became king by 25, but even though he knew the guy was young, he still pictured him looking way different. Cecilia looked like she'd seen this a million times, so Yuki figured it happened all the time, and then he noticed Sheikah had totally passed out. Sylvia told the king they could get back to business, while the prince just laughed and apologized for getting totally caught up in his own little world with her. The king turns to Yuki, Sheikah, and Cecilia, telling them they're here because of the crazy incident at Daggest village. The report looks okay, but something is definitely bugging him, so he looks at Cecilia Aquarine from the hero squad for some answers. Even though she's standing right there, he says Yuki is just some random ranked adventurer with no background at all, while right at that moment, Yuki is busy trying to wake Sheikah up. The king wants to see what this guy is actually made of, so he asks if she's cool with fighting Sylvia right now, but suddenly the dude jumps up and says he's totally down. Sylvia whips out her sword and says they should get started right now, taking a huge horizontal swing that gets dodged with a quick jump, while the king just smiles and says it's looking. She goes for another swing, jumping and spinning through the air, and when she brings her sword crashing down, the guy pulls off a crazy mid-air twist and bounces right off her. She puts her sword away and tells Sheik he's got insane skills for his age, and the king totally agrees, saying he's finally gonna trust Cecilia, Sheikah, and Yuki. Cecilia is a total nervous wreck while thanking the king, but he just laughs it off and tells her to calm down since he knew her secret from day one. The knights gave him the full report after scouting the battlefield. It was pretty obvious they won, since losers don't usually walk back home on their own. He was really just messing with them He told them they totally killed it in the village and deserved a prize, so he called them over while Yuki started wondering what they should get. Hearing that was super sweet, and as he thought about how awesome the prize was, he couldn't stop picturing Cecilia. Yuki was totally lost in a daydream and blurted out that he wanted Cecilia to be his girlfriend. Cecilia was completely caught off guard by his sudden confession. That's when word spread through the whole castle that Yuki wanted Cecilia to be his girl, and Darts, Sylvia, and Sheik were just staring at him in total shock. He realized he just blurted his thoughts out loud and was dying to see how Cecilia would react. Our hero turns to the girl and catches her looking totally shocked. But then she shuts her eyes and gives Yuki the scariest glare ever, making him realize he's basically dead meat. Out of nowhere, Sylvia starts screaming that Yuki is a total jerk. The prince told him to pick any reward he wanted, but Yuki actually had the nerve to ask for something super embarrassing. Sylvia. He's totally lost, so he looks over at Sheik, who's doubling over laughing, and Cecilia, who's just hiding her face in her hands. Out of nowhere, Yuki heard a laugh from the side, and the king asked him if this whole crazy mess wasn't super entertaining. The guy had no clue what the king was yapping about, but he figured he was finally safe. Then Cecilia looks him in the eye and tells him he better be ready for some serious. The king started cracking up, saying Cecilia and Yuki were getting along way too well, but Yuki just asked if it really looked like that to everyone else, and right as the king tried to bring up, he told the guy to just ignore what he said, making the excuse that he was super nervous and totally let it slip. Our hero was so hyped he totally lost his cool, and the king admitted he had no idea such a wild guy lived in his kingdom. He totally would have added him to the hero squad if they met earlier, but Yuki said that was way too much because of his rank. The king turned to Yuki and finally gave him an answer, apologizing because he just can't ignore what Aquaran thinks. Yuki notices the king is feeling super guilty and tells him to stop, leaving Cecilia totally stunned because she never expected to hear the king say something like that. The guy turns to Cecilia Aquarain and asks what kind of prize she wants, but she says she doesn't need a thing because just getting to serve the kingdom is reward enough for her. The guy told her that her loyalty to the kingdom was seriously impressive. He knew that bringing her and the heroes squad along was totally the right call. Then he asked if the rest of the team. Cecilia confirms everyone's back to their daily grind, and apparently Yuga's been super busy dealing with world politics and wrecking A-rank monsters. Makana even scored the legendary title of Court Witch. And just like that, Raven became the captain of the Castle Knights. Cecilia hit the road as a traveling priestess to help anyone she could, and even though the group split up, they're all still chasing the exact same dream. The king says he wants them to keep protecting the kingdom, and the girl is totally down for it. But then he suddenly remembers something and asks Sheik what he wants as a reward. The guy thought it over for a second and then decided he just wanted a massive pile of sweets. A little later, Yuki, Cecilia, and Sheik finally head back home, where Yuki spots the guy looking totally hyped. Our hero actually thought they were brought to the castle just to leave with a basket of candy. Luckily, the King of Darts turned out to be a super chill guy. He even told them this dude is actually way more of a loser, but then Cecilia calls him up saying they need to talk and asks him to come over. Yuki shivers and nods, so Sheik says goodbye to the girl inside her and heads off to share some snacks with the rest of the crew. Our MC was thinking about how awesome it felt to finally be alone with his girlfriend in her room, and he was so hyped up that he honestly didn't even know what to do with himself. But that just wasn't happening because Cecilia was being straight up terrifying. She walks right up to Yuki and asks if he's got something to say, so he instantly drops to his knees to apologize, leaving Cecilia totally confused about what he's even sorry. Yuki admits he confessed to her right in front of the whole crowd, and they both agree it was a total disaster. She tells him she doesn't hate him, but bringing this up in public is seriously the worst. Yuki's totally shocked to see her actually crying, so he immediately starts apologizing. He realizes that obsessing over the award totally distracted him, but Cecilia says they've got more to talk about, and he's totally down for it. Out of nowhere, Celia bursts into the room to see if Cecilia is finally back, but she stops dead when she sees how weird things look and demands to know what Yuki and Cecilia are up to. The girl spilled the whole story to her mom. Her mom finally realized that Yuki had been acting like a total jerk. She asked how anyone could even think about confessing their feelings in a place like that. Cecilia tells her mom she's got it all wrong, but her mom just asks if Yuki knows he needs to be way more careful about picking the right time and place for something like that. She screams at him, asking if he realizes some other guy is going to steal Cecilia if he keeps acting like this, but Yuki yells back that he'd never let that happen. He can't stand the thought of Cecilia marrying another guy, and he's even ready to use demon powers to stop it from happening. Celia giggled and asked if he was really plotting to wreck the other guy, and even though he tried to deny it, the girls told him his reaction was great, but totally pointless. The lady says this proves his feelings are legit, but Yuki just scratches his head and says it's still not enough, making Cecilia think he's being a total creep until he shuts her. Celia giggled and teased them about being a cute couple, making both Yuki and Cecilia turn super red instantly. She could tell that Yuki was actually dead serious about his feelings for Cecilia. She thinks they'd be a perfect match, but Yuki warns Cecilia to stay on guard, so she just sighs and goes along with it. Celia wondered what was going through Yuki's head before dropping a bombshell. He's banned from seeing Cecilia for an entire month so he can finally learn how to treat girls right. The guy starts panicking and begs Celia for 2 more weeks, but she shuts him down, saying he's already had plenty of time to think about what he did. Celia flashed a smirk and asked if she really couldn't handle just 1 month, leaving Cecilia totally stunned and completely speechless. She just grinned and told him he only had 2 weeks left, because after that, he'd finally get to see Cecilia again and make their bond even stronger. Result: he stood there on the street, thinking this breakup might actually make them stronger in the end. He knew that crying wasn't going to do anything to fix his pain. Then, Cecilia gave him such a kind smile that he literally started tearing up right then and there. He swore to himself that he's never giving up. When they finally see Cecilia again, their bond is going to be way tighter. And one day, he's definitely going to tell her how he... A bit later, the guy wakes up to find he's turned into a straight-up demon and starts looking around, totally lost on where he actually is. Suddenly, Cecilia calls out his name, but she's totally shocked and asks if it's really him, since he looks like a completely different person now. She actually admits she's the one who did it, and while the guy is totally shocked, his scary demon form just vanishes. Cecilia asks if he's finally remembering something, but Yuki just apologizes and says his brain is totally fried and he's completely lost. The girl reaches out her hand and tells him to follow, so Yuki grabs on and asks where they're even going. Cecilia is standing in the middle of a flower field when she suddenly runs up and clings to the guy, and he actually calls her by her first name. He looks her right in the eyes and pops the big question, and she totally says yes. Then she actually leans in and offers to kiss him. The guy is totally shocked, shouts her name, and then snaps awake only to realize he's kissing his pillow. Yuki and the statue guy just stood there in total silence until Yuki finally snapped, yelling that this whole thing was just a crazy dream he'd cooked up in his head. He buried his face in his hands, wondering why Cecilia actually said yes right then, especially since this same dream has been messing with his head ever since they split up 2 weeks ago. Suddenly, the kid whips around and grabs Guy, demanding to know if he's really the one putting those crazy dreams in his head. The gargoyle was totally lost by what Yuki said and didn't want to look like a joke, especially since he couldn't believe this crazy dream was happening now, so he told himself to snap out of it and get it together. Yuki literally morphs Guy into a crazy-looking statue, then plops down and asks for forgiveness because he had a rough day and is questioning everything now. Guy asked why his face was getting wrecked again, and the kid just gave a nervous smile and apologized for making Cecilia mad. The gargoyle says he couldn't care less about human drama and shuts down his excuses, while Yuki tells Tom he's a total jerk and gets ready to bail. Guy starts losing it, screaming that he heard every word they said, but Yuki just fires back that he doesn't know anything at all. Yuki heads to the guild to get some advice from Claymon, but the guy basically tells him to just shut up and take the hits because that's just how life works. If he can just stay patient, that lap pillow paradise is waiting for him. But Yuki tells him he was a total idiot for even thinking about asking Clemon for help. The guy asks what he did wrong, but the kid tells him the trick only works for him and Sophia, so it won't help him at all. Suddenly, he feels a hand on his shoulder and turns around to ask Raven how his day off went, then awkwardly tries to get Yuki to explain what the heck happened to him. The kid figures Raven is all about logic instead of feelings, so when Raven asks for a moment of his time, he's curious to hear what Yuki's big request is actually about. Yuki asks if he can run something by the guy, and Raven gets totally hyped, saying he's not sure if he can actually help, but he'll give it his all because he thinks it's totally adorable, so he suggests they head somewhere else since it's getting way too crowded. They finally get to Yuki's room, where Raven spots the gargoyle and asks him if he seriously just bought a new statue. He takes a close look and says the statue is actually incredible, which totally blows Yuki's mind since he didn't think anyone would actually like his work. He was sure he'd just made something totally confusing, so Raven looked at the kid staring at him and asked if he was even making sense. Yuki told him everything was fine, but in his head, Yuki suddenly asks Raven for some love advice, and Raven is totally shocked that he's the one being asked. He admits he's got zero confidence and isn't sure if Yuki should even talk to him, but Yuki tells him he should at least give it a shot and listen. After Yuki finished her story, Raven basically admitted he totally blew it with someone he loves by saying the wrong thing, and now he's desperate to show he can actually act right the next time. Yuki was shocked Raven was actually stressing over this, especially since he thought the guy was a total heartthrob with a super sweet voice. Out of nowhere, Raven offers a gift to say sorry, and Yuki realizes it's the exact same pendant they missed out on when their last date turned into a total disaster. Yuki is totally hyped and tells Raven it's a killer idea, especially since there was something they couldn't get their hands on during their last date. Raven looked totally pissed, and when Yuki asked what was wrong, Raven snapped that Yuki was already dating his girl and things were getting way too serious. Raven is a total nobody compared to this guy, and Yuki finally realizes that her relationship with Happiness hasn't moved an inch. Suddenly, Yuki gets a total light bulb moment. He asks Raven if they can go hit the shops to find some gifts together. Raven's not so sure, and asks if he should even be there. Hipponese might act like she has no feelings, but she's actually super protective of the things she loves. It's also the perfect excuse to hang out, and Raven grins because he's totally down for this gift shopping plan. Yuki asks why they're still wasting time and tells the guy to tag along, and Raven is totally down for it. They eventually hit up the accessory shop, and even though Raven's in a disguise, the place is totally packed with couples. Raven awkwardly whispered to Yuki, asking why they were rushing since he just wanted to go home, but Yuki told him he totally got it, even though it was way too late to back out now. Now that they've finally arrived, it's time to pick out the gifts, so Raven starts carefully choosing the perfect jewelry. Yuki watched Raven stress over picking the perfect gift until a store worker suddenly walked up and offered to help him find what he was looking for. Raven scribbles a note saying Uma needs a hair ornament, and once the girl confirms it with a quick nod, she points the way and tells him to follow her. Yuki realizes Raven only carries a notepad so he doesn't have to talk to anyone, but then he spots a stunning white feather hairpin shaped like a rose and is totally blown away by how beautiful it is. Yuki thought Raven finally made his move and grabbed that feather charm. He finally picked up the one thing he needed to be happy. Now it was Yuki's turn to go ahead and pick out. He spotted the pendant he and Cecilia couldn't get last time and was hyped to see it was still on the shelf. They finally scored some awesome gifts and headed out carrying those fancy rose-covered bags. Suddenly, McCain calls out to Raven, and she turns back to the swordsman, finally remembering they're actually on the same team along with a priest. She smirks and asks what two dudes are even doing in a shop like this. And just as her mind starts racing with wild ideas, Yuki cuts her off to ask what she's actually thinking. He claims they're just there to grab some presents, no big deal. The girl asks who the gifts are actually for. Yuki's about to spill that they're for his crush. McCann giggles and admits she totally thought the swordsman was after the priest, but since she was wrong, Raven is left feeling super awkward. Then there's Yuga, who accidentally ends up surrounded by a crowd of girls just because he's too nice to walk away from them. Raven didn't just stay away from girls, he avoided literally everyone, and this was the guy who served as the hero team's star swordsman. She gave Raven a long look and sighed, knowing that just like always, he wasn't going to say a single word. She actually says sorry for laughing at his voice the very first time they were in a group together. Yuki looks at the girl and thinks she was laughing at Raven's voice too, which triggers a memory for him, but he can tell she actually feels really bad about it. Suddenly, a weird noise echoes out, and as Yuki tries to figure it out, he and Raven both turn to look at a totally clueless McCain. The girl asked what they were looking for, and if they were finally done being hungry. Yuki shuts that down fast, and it looks like they're finally ready to take off. McCain stops the guy out of nowhere and says she's not done talking yet, so they end up at a restaurant. Yuki gets super annoyed that she's making all the decisions, but Raven tells him it's useless to fight it. Whatever McCain wants, he gets, and before long, they pull up to a restaurant. Yuki is totally lost because they were only supposed to be buying a gift, so she has no idea how. The staff is super nice and the food is fire, but then Raven whispers to Yuki, calling him out for liking Cecilia because of the look on his face when McCanny mentioned the gift, and Raven starts shaking and warns that Yuki has officially made Cecilia herself furious. Yuki whispers for Raven to chill because they need a solid plan to dodge Makona's questions, just as the waitress walks over to ask what they're eating. Yuki rips the menu right out and tells the girl to bring every single dish on the page, while McCain panics and asks just how much they're planning to eat today. Yuki complained he was starving and said guys need way more food, but McCain totally brushed him off, so I just ordered a light drink for myself. Right then, the guys were busy stuffing their faces, and McCain noticed they weren't even planning on talking to her. Yuki smirked, knowing you can't talk while you're stuffing your face, and that was his and Raven's whole plan. McCain let out a sigh and told Cecilia she just wanted to hang out and swap some wild stories. Yuki slammed back a glass of water and told McCain to keep the story going. She just grinned and told him he had to hear her stories first, asking how things were going with the priestess Cecilia, but Yuki said he wouldn't exactly call his new gig a promotion. Meekin spills the tea that Cecilia is the priest from the Heroes Squad, and she's actually on a date with some totally basic guy who has zero future. Yuki says there's a reason for it, but Makani just sighs, knowing Yuga was always doing stuff to get on the priest's bad side. Yuga walked right in while the priestess was changing, and then they had a super awkward run-in at the public baths, which made Yuki totally snap and demand to know where the hero was hiding. He started blasting magic and vowed to end the hero, but McCain jumped in and told him to cool it. This guy is a total chick magnet, and he's always catching Cecilia in the most interesting situations. McCain told the guy to shut up since she wasn't finished, and even though Cecilia was scolding him gently, that was actually the most brutal part. Everywhere Yuga went, he was accidentally stealing hearts without even trying. He couldn't stay in one place for more than 3 days before things got way too intense. Random girls would literally just... Our hero was way too nice to say no, so even though McCann kept warning him, he kept making dates with girls and totally messed up their schedule. After their trip was delayed way too long, Cecilia finally hit her breaking point and turned to the hero. She called him out for being way too reckless with girls. Then she hit him with a massive lecture that lasted 2 whole hours. Just because she's usually sweet doesn't mean you can. McCann asks the guy if he's finally ready to hear the story about the swordsman. Yuki's grinning as he apologizes for Raven still eating, but then Raven holds up a note saying he's totally hit his limit. Yuki whispers to ask if he's doing all right, but Raven says he can't even swallow his food because he's terrified McConaughey is going to start blabbing about all their cringy and awkward moments. He's actually just super shy, but he looks at Raven, slams his fist on the table, and yells that he'll protect her innocent love. McCann gets super annoyed and says he's making her sound like the bad guy, but Yuki just asks if that's not the truth, and she admits she really wanted to help them out but ended up being totally useless. Blushing hard, she admits things have been super awkward with Yuga lately, and says she was just hoping the group could give her some advice. Yuki totally thought they were just there to get some advice on their life problems. Yuki distracts McCann from Raven by asking what's really bugging her, and she admits that Yuga just doesn't talk to her like he used to anymore. She totally missed how he was blowing her off, and she knows the exact reason why. The girl turns to the swordsman and calls him out for knowing the truth, and Raven totally freezes up. Yuki feels the vibe getting way more serious, and when Makani asks him to keep it a secret, he promises he won't tell a soul. Raven nods, and McCain realizes she finally trusts him enough to spill some top-secret info that hasn't even been released to the public yet. They got wrecked in the Demon Lord's castle over and over, and Yuki is totally stunned because he just realized he knew this the whole time. She explains it wasn't actually the Demon Lord's fault, but some mid-level demon from his castle instead. Yuki asks if it's for real, but deep down he already knows the truth because that guy is literally him. The Khan admits that Demon was a total beast, and she has no clue how it even got into the castle, making Yuki realize they're in major trouble. She keeps going and says they got totally wrecked. They were ready to die right then and there, but out of nowhere, they suddenly woke up in a village nearby. The demon actually healed up his battle wounds, leaving Yuki totally shocked that his enemy was actually a super nice guy. McCann said it was straight up embarrassing, proving the gap between them was so massive he actually started feeling bad for them. Yuki explains they actually managed to turn the Demon Lord to their side, and while the girl thinks that's a win, Yuki can feel the whole room getting super tense. McCain agrees the guy is right, but he's totally gonna flip out at her next words since he's so crazy about Cecilia. She explains the demon's deal. They can only pass if they leave the priest behind. McCain was the one who actually talked everyone into agreeing to these rules. Yuki was totally stunned, but Raven just told him to stop pointing fingers since he was part of the mess too and had no other choice. Though what really freaked him out was realizing he set up these rules just to confess to Cecilia, but honestly, he's feeling pretty guilty about it. Now he's just a clueless outsider who's totally in love with Cecilia, and Yuki asks if they'd seriously be okay with her dying. McCain starts screaming that there's no way, yelling that this fight was never supposed to be this dangerous. They'd already faced the Demon King right outside his castle and knew exactly how strong he was, but after looking back at everything they'd learned from past fights, they were sure they could actually win. The people of Clarence thought they had this win in the bag, but then he showed up out of nowhere. Who knew the Demon King was hiding a secret weapon like that? Yuki realizes there's no way he can tell them he used to be a total shut-in. Everyone was 100% sure they'd win, but they got totally wrecked by some random demons, and the girl was so shocked she couldn't even find the words to. They had to keep the fans believing in the hero team and protect Yuga's reputation, because if word got out that they failed, Yuga would be the first one to take the fall. They kept taking L after L for a whole month until they totally ran out of excuses. But then McCain heard some crazy rumors about weird heroes in their country. Mikan was desperate to keep Yuga safe, but then a demon showed up with a crazy deal. She couldn't stop herself from grinning because this was finally their big shot. If they lose one more time, it's game over for everyone. She keeps telling herself that, but she knows it's just a lame excuse. Even after everything they've faced together. She almost got killed, but she's clearly feeling super guilty, so Yuki watched her like a hawk while hearing the truth about what happened to Cecilia. The second the Demon King hit the dirt, McCain noticed Cecilia looking weird and sprinted over to check on her. The second the Demon King was defeated, Makani ignored her exhaustion and bolted straight back to Cecilia. The girl spotted Cecilia and flashed a sweet smile while hyping up McCain, relieved to see her friend wasn't hurt. And Cecilia told her she was just as stoked that they were both totally safe. McCain couldn't even close his eyes because Cecilia's words were stuck on repeat in his head. She told them the girl was totally fine, then she just blacked out right on the spot. The girl was totally speechless and couldn't even say sorry or thank you to Cecilia. She just wanted to protect her guy. But now she owes Cecilia big time, and he's already. Yuki asks her what she thinks now that she's had time to process it, and if everything is finally okay. McCain totally agrees that things can't keep going like this, and the girl says she's got to head out, but thanks them for listening first. Yuki and Raven feel a bit bummed out, but they realize it's finally time for them to head out too. Back in his room, he's hyped because those 2 weeks are finally up tomorrow, and he stares into the mirror knowing the big day is almost here. He looks at his reflection and feels kind of sorry, knowing that since nobody can actually beat him, he's just going to end up burning away in a massive red fire. Today is a total disaster for everyone, but our main guy is just standing there looking super cocky. Yuki was super proud of his noble soul and his poetic words, but then Guy turned around and asked him what kind of circus he was trying to run. Yuki spun around, turned bright red, and screamed at the top of his lungs before bolting out of the room, leaving Guy totally confused by the whole thing. He hid his bright red face, admitting he was so hyped to see Cecilia tomorrow that he totally forgot Guy even existed, wondering if the dude ever actually sleeps. He opens his eyes to see Till standing there with a bag, and she greets him, saying it's been way too long since they last saw each other. The guy agrees it's been way too long since they last saw each other and asks what's up. So Till tells him a lady wants him at the mansion tomorrow. Yuki's totally caught off guard and asks if she really showed up just to say thanks. Then he turns to Tilt and asks what she's hiding behind her back. She tells him they're just books, and when he asks about them, she totally agrees while Yuki catches her looking super happy. The guy says he's heading out but promises he'll still come by to visit, and Phil is totally stoked as she thanks him. He can't go back home and doesn't even want to, so he just grabs the cash and starts wandering the streets. He spots a bakery with some delicious-looking cupcakes, so he heads inside and notices a girl behind the counter who looks super young. A massive, jacked dude walks right up to the young man. Yuki is completely shocked by the sight of him. He goes over and asks where the lady who usually works here went. The guy bags up the cupcakes for Yuki and says he's sorry for being a bit too rough and squishing them. He thanked the guy, looked at the crumbled cupcakes, and after taking a bite, he told him they tasted amazing. Everything started going downhill fast when he accidentally bumped into a terrifying beast man, spotted a couple mocking a lonely guy, and then almost stepped right into a gross pile of trash on the ground. Yuki's feeling like he's on a total winning streak, but then he accidentally crashes into a little kid who just dropped his kebabs everywhere. Our guy grabbed another round of kebabs for the young man and even snagged an extra one for himself. He told the kid to watch his back from now on, and after the boy thanked him, Yuki just let out a heavy sigh. He was just about to say his day totally sucked when he realized he'd been robbed and saw a guy booking it. The guy screamed about his trash luck for running into a pickpocket and immediately started chasing him down. The guy sprints into an alley and screams that there's no way the thief is getting away. He booted the thief so hard he slammed right into another pickpocket, leaving Yuki totally shocked that there was a second guy. He said it was all good, but finding that wallet was way more important right now, when suddenly, someone called out to him. He spun around to find Yugu pointing a sword right at him, demanding that Yuki hand back the stolen purse. Yuki claimed the wallet was actually his, but since Yuga had just been robbed himself, He straight up refused to give it back. Fine, he'll just take it by force. The guy swings his sword, but Yuki dodges and begs Yuga to just listen to them for a second. Before long, Yuga was already surrounded by the city guards, and Yuki realized his day was officially a total disaster. The guards grabbed Yuki and told him he'd be spilling all his secrets at headquarters, making him realize this was officially the worst day of his life. Yuki was stuck in the guard room with his hands cuffed, telling the officer for the millionth time that he was just trying to return a stolen purse. The guard asks if this is seriously his first time and tells him to stop being stubborn and spill the beans, but Yuki just frowns and says he's telling the truth while secretly planning his next move. Yuga just says whatever he wants, making everyone think he's the bad guy, while Yuki shuts his eyes and realizes they're in huge trouble. Out of nowhere, Raven walks in, and the guard starts shaking as he turns to face the commander. Yuki was totally shocked to see Raven there, and he quickly scanned the room to figure out exactly what was going on. Raven flashed a note asking what went down while Yuki sat there in total silence. Then the swordsman scribbled a message telling the guard he better listen up. The guard finally saluted Raven and the guy, wishing them a good day before popping the cuffs off Yuki, who just shook his hands out, super relieved that his suffering was finally over for the day. Raven proved Yuki was totally innocent, and Yuga finally felt bad enough to give the guy a real apology. Yuki sighed, admitting he only made it out alive because Raven told him to stop apologizing for everything. He looked out the window and saw the cops hauling Yuki off to the station. Raven promised Yuki he'd give Yuga a serious reality check and said he was super sorry, while Yuki totally agreed that the whole thing was just a nightmare. The guy asks Raven if he's talking to Yuga, but then he realizes he's actually just using a pen and paper. Yuki tells Raven his plan is a total fail, but Raven says he's just dealing with it after a crazy party incident, right when Duke bursts through the door calling his name. She'd heard the knights were holding the captain prisoner and was just about to demand to know exactly where they were keeping him. Suddenly, she spots Yuki standing right next to Raven, who's busy giving our main guy a serious glare. Duke stared the captain down and called him out for breaking the law while Cecilia wasn't watching, but Yuki screamed that he didn't do anything wrong. Duke said she got it, but she couldn't help roasting him for getting robbed, which made Yuki so embarrassed he told everyone to just shut up about it. Raven was busy scribbling at the table when he realized he'd totally missed something today and apologized to the guy. He finishes up and says the mark is set so they can finally head to Yuga, but Yuki is blown away by how massive that stack of paper in Raven's hands is. Duke reminds Raven that she said it doesn't matter if he's a hero or not, but Raven begs him to stop because she's already totally overwhelmed. Raven heads out, so Yuki crosses his arms and pulls Duke aside to tell her Raven thought she was acting like a total creep. But the girl just shudders and insists that's not what was happening. Yuki reveals that Raven isn't just some guy, he's actually Commander Duke, but the girl says she only listens to him because he's her captain and only calls him commander when they're out in public. Suddenly, there's a knock at the door and a voice begging for forgiveness, making both of them snap their heads toward her. This super cute elf girl named Elena suddenly walks in and tells Duke she ditched her training again, while Yuki just stares her down with pure judgment. Elena grabbed Duke's hand and told her to come along. Yuki looked closer and noticed the girl had pointy ears. It finally clicked. She was actually an elf. Yuki was totally blindsided by the elf knights, and after seeing Duke try to handle everything solo, he decides it's finally time for him to head out too. A bit later, he runs into the hero Yuga. Yuga was just stoked that Yuki finally made it out of that building, but Yuki just stares at the hero like he's total trash. Yuki turns to walk away, but Yuga grabs his shoulder and tells him to hold up, saying he's actually been waiting for him this whole time. He suddenly remembers they've actually met before because the guy was hanging out with Cecilia, and while Yuki nods, Yuga admits that alley was just way too dark to recognize him. He begs Yuki to forgive him for the whole mess, asks if she's actually mad, and looks like a total hero while doing it. Yuga started glowing so bright that Yuki had to shield his eyes, and since he was right next to the night unit, he told everyone he was totally fine just to keep Raven out of trouble. The hero wonders if that's for real, then mentions a fire restaurant nearby. He asks the guy to join him, and Yuki's totally down, following him right away. The guy yelled at the hero to pipe down and stay humble, but Hugo just said he wasn't trying to be noisy. They finally made it to the restaurant, where Yuki realized it was the exact same spot he'd visited with Makani and Raven back in the day. And Hugo mentioned the place was huge, and that he remembers Makane saying the food and service here are top tier, and Yuki starts thinking about all the other secrets he's learned from him. The guy looks over the menu and says, "It all looks pretty cool." Hugo nods along and agrees. Right then, the waitress walks up to them. Yuki tells her he's just gonna grab. Our guy agreed, figuring he'd stuffed his face so much last time that he was already totally over the food here. Hugo snapped him out of his thoughts and said he was seriously sorry for everything that went down earlier. He admits he was being way too reckless, and that's how they got into this mess. But Yuki says it's all good because he honestly couldn't care less. Pugo calls him out, saying that for a hero, he's being way too reckless with an innocent guy's life. Yuki felt like he was being way too mean to the hero, but Hugo told him it was all good, so he let out a huge sigh of relief and jumped up to get straight to the point. He asked what the deal was between Yuki and Cecilia, and after a quiet moment, Yuki just said they were friends. Hugo was totally shook, and knew this was a disaster since Cecilia was actually friends with the guy. Hugo asks again if there's really nothing going on with Cecilia, so Yuki tells him to just ask Raven if he's that suspicious, since they're all just friends and he has... Hugo's totally shocked that this guy is also buddies with Raven, and Yuki confirms it's the truth. The hero froze up and went totally silent, muttering to himself about his squad while Yuki just stared at him like he'd lost his mind. Hugo sat down at the table, got dead serious, and asked the young guy if he could get some advice. Yuki's confused why he's the one giving tips, but Hugo just cringes and admits he's actually got 0 friends. Yuki's totally freaking out, saying this is a huge disaster and he definitely shouldn't have found out Hugo's pathetic secret. The hero keeps pushing and asks how he can get closer to Cecilia. Yuki realizes things are going south fast, and he's totally freaking out. Sure, he told Hugo they're just friends, but he's totally crushing on her and definitely isn't helping his rival. Yuki says sorry and mentions he just met a girl, but unlike the other guys, he's still basically a total stranger to her. Hugo is way closer to the girl than Yuki, so he's the one who should go ask someone on the team for the scoop. Hugo thinks Raven is still salty about getting scolded, but then he shows off a massive pile of papers Raven actually wrote. He's never seen Raven work this hard, and even Yuki is. Hugo rules out Makani too since she doesn't care about Cecilia one bit, leaving Yuki totally shocked and confused about why Hugo feels that way. Yuki starts asking what kind of person Makana really is, so Hugo asks if our hero actually knows her. He reveals that Makana has been his girlfriend since they were little kids, and she messed with Cecilia that one time, and he's never going to forgive her for it. He asks Yuki if McCann is a total monster for betraying her friend like that, but Yuki gets super heated and tells him to just slow down. Hugo was totally shocked when the kid suddenly flipped the switch and got dead serious. Yuki says she talked the demon into the deal, but didn't he wonder why she'd even do that? He asks Hugo if he really thinks Mikane is the only one. MC says Raven and McCain just filled him in, and it turns out the girl was actually blaming herself for everything that happened this whole time. Yuki loses it and asks Hugo if he even realizes that McCain spent days and nights crying his eyes out. Hugo was totally shocked and asked why she felt that way, since Makani was the one who actually ditched Cecilia. She's the only one who actually took the demon's deal, so she's honestly just the worst. Yuki totally lost it and yelled at Hugo to shut his mouth, and while even Raven was starting to feel bad, you have to wonder if the hero felt any guilt for this mess at Ho. Hugo screamed that Yuki was totally wrong because there's no way the hero would ever act like that. Yuki tells him to chill out and answer one more time, asking if this guy really isn't the angel he looks like. Hugo was totally stunned, and he actually started to tear up. Yuki knew they were in deep trouble when Hugo turned into a total snake, blaming the whole mess on Makini and acting like he was completely innocent. He just couldn't take down that demon, and Yuki noticed Hugo was already breaking down in tears. This guy is basically just a kid, and Yuki really should have kept her mouth shut. But she looks him in the eye and asks if he's seriously going to give up just because he finally failed for the first time. He needs to realize he'll never be happy if he keeps running from his mistakes, and even though Yuki actually made the hero cry, he just hoped the guy would be okay. Huko says that the moment McCann found out he wanted to be a hero, she started grinding her magic like crazy, and she's always chewing him out for being reckless, but since he's been a total magnet for trouble since they were kids, he's completely lost on what to do now. Yuki tells Yugo that with an attitude like that, it's no wonder he's always getting yelled at, leaving Yugo totally stunned. The guy says Makone is doing all this because she really cares about the hero, and asks him if he finally gets it. Hugo was super hyped and said he'd go apologize right this second, then let her vent about every single thing on her mind. Yuki tells him he's got this. Then Hugo grabs his hand and says he's not going to Makana alone because he's still counting on him, which totally blows Yuki's mind. Hugo and Yuki finally made it to Mokne's place, but Yuki was totally out of breath. I asked Hugo if he was actually doing this on purpose, and he just asked where the guy was going in such a huge rush. Hugo says sorry, and admits he'd be way too scared to do this alone, so he asks Yuki to wait outside, and when Yuki says yes, Hugo is super relieved and gives him a huge thanks. The hero suddenly realizes he totally forgot to introduce himself, so he tells the guy his name is Hugo, and thanks him for the heads up. Our guy introduces himself and says he's hyped to meet them, noticing Hugo is finally acting a bit more chill, but as Hugo tries to make plans with Yuki, the MC just shoves him. Yuki was the one who started the beef between Hugo and Makani, but he's also the guy who fixed it, and now he thinks being the hero is actually a pretty good look. Yuki realizes the guy didn't even knock, and the next second, Hugo barges into Makani's house while the girl is right in the middle of changing. McCain spots Yuki in her house and starts screaming her head off, totally mortified that Hugo actually showed up and caught her at the worst possible time. Yuki finally remembers that Hugo is just a lucky guy, and right then, the hero screams at McConaughey to shut up and listen. She begged him to hold on because things were getting super weird. Hugo told her he finally got the whole picture. He realized he'd been way too mean to her. Yuki called Hugo a total lost cause. Hugo kept telling Makana how she was always there for him and helped him with everything. He was acting like a total selfish jerk. Finally, McCain felt totally awkward and called out Yugi's name, admitting that a basic sorry wouldn't fix anything, but he told her she had to do something just to feel a bit better. Hugo told the girl she should totally lay into him, leaving Yuki and McCain absolutely stunned. McCain got super mad, but then she just smirked and laughed, saying this guy totally barged in while she was changing, and now he's actually asking her to yell at him. She gives him a wicked grin and asks if he's actually a fan of pain, but Hugo is totally lost because he's just trying to fix his mistakes. The girl snatched up the magic staff, told the guy she wasn't asking for permission to teach him a lesson, and just straight up whacked him with it. Yuki turned his back on them and decided to just head home, leaving those two to keep throwing hands behind him. Maybe once they finally cool down, they'll actually make up. Later on, the guy gets home and spots Till and Gaia, where the girl hugs the statue and tells the gargoyle he looks totally awesome, but Gaia tells her to stop leaning on him. Yuki shut the door and realized he'd totally spaced out on Till being there this whole time. Till started cleaning a statue and kept apologizing, but Guy told her to stop since the girl still hadn't fully recovered yet. Till sniffled and hung her head, agreeing with the gargoyle, while Guy told her that if the creature didn't stay by his side, he'd come right to her. The girl was totally hyped, and Yuki let out a breath and grinned, knowing they had to keep moving so they wouldn't get in the way of Till and Guy. Yuki peeks his eyes open and sees Cecilia sitting right on the bed, calling out his name. Yuki was totally stunned when she tucked her hair back and admitted she missed him so much she ran all the way there, leaving him blushing and sweating like crazy. He leaped back with a scream only to find Guy's stone-cold face right in his grill, so Yuki demanded to know what he was doing there, but Guy just smirked and said Yuki was super embarrassed and started getting aggressive, demanding to know why Guy sent him that weird dream. But the gargoyle just said he did it as a way to say thanks for Yuki. Yuki remembered Guy hanging out with Till, so he knew exactly what a demon's thanks really meant. And Guy just flashed a big smile, saying she loved Yuki's new look, so he used a bit of his power to help him out. Yuki tells him that just taking a nap isn't a way to show thanks, but Guy says that even if he doesn't remember the dream, he knows it wasn't. Yuki's face turned beet red as he hid behind his hands, and Guy had absolutely no clue why he was acting so weird. The gargoyle was just trying to say thanks, but his plan was totally backfiring on him. Our Guy turned bright red and was totally speechless, because even though he was dying to see Cecilia, he's way too embarrassed to even face her now. The guy told her it was no big deal, so she grabbed the jewelry box meant for Cecilia and checked herself out in the mirror. He struck an epic hero pose and told his reflection to listen up, because he's never going to forget this day for as long as he lives. Manny slammed his door and headed out, but as he walked through the city, he didn't see a single soul and figured he must have left way too early. He spots a bakery and thinks about grabbing some of those amazing cupcakes, but right then, someone calls out to him from the side. This sweet girl is giving away free cupcakes and tells him to grab one since he's already been to her bakery before. The guy is totally shocked as he reaches for a bag of cupcakes. The girl explains her brother felt terrible for squishing them earlier. To make it up to him, their bakery is giving them all away. He turns to the siblings to thank them for the cupcakes, then strikes a heroic pose that makes Yuki realize he hasn't changed one bit. He spots the beast man, who actually apologizes for staring earlier, admitting he was just being way too paranoid since he didn't realize the kid was actually a total pro. Yuki says it was cool meeting him, and the guy mentions he knows Clemen, telling Yuki to swing by his guild whenever he's free. Yuki realized the guy wasn't actually being mean on purpose. He just looked so scary that Yuki thought he'd been busted as a demon. Suddenly, he spots a bunch of guards standing right next to a man and a little kid. The guy bows deep and tells Yuki his young master really messed with him yesterday, so he's there to give a massive apology from Mr. Butler. The guy looks at the young master and admits he was playing around way too much yesterday, which is how he lost track of him, so he hands Yuki a little gift to make up for. They bow and head out, leaving Yuki dying to know what's inside that package, especially since the guy is super rich and it's probably worth a fortune. He opens the bag and finds a massive mountain of fried meat skewers packed inside. Yuki heads to the manor to see Cecilia, feeling like he's on top of the world since everything is finally going his way, and a girl greets him as Captain before pointing. Yuki greets Happiness and tells her she doesn't need to tag along since he knows this place perfectly, but she just tells him to follow her anyway. Since it's her job, Yuki basically has to say yes, but he's left wondering why she's being so intense about everything. Happings leads Yuki down the hall, and he's shaking like crazy because he's finally about to see Cecilia. Just as he's about to open the door, he starts getting super nervous, so Happy teases him for being shy while Yuki yells out, asking who she's even talking about. Happiness acts like she has no clue what he's talking about, so Yuki asks why she's being so cold, but she keeps a straight face while Yuki screams that his hearing. Happens asks if Yuki is finally chill, and a shocked Yuki says sorry, thanking her for helping him get his head back in the game. He thinks Happiness is the real deal, so he just smiles and decides it's finally time to head inside. Yuki bursts into Cecilia's room super hyped to see her, and while she's just chilling with a book, she looks up and tells him it's been way too long. He scratches his head and thinks it's been 6 months, but she just laughs and says it's only been 2 weeks. Man, he's still as funny as ever. The guy switches things up and tells her he brought some food, and when she peeks inside the bags, she finds a bunch of cupcakes and fried meat. She's totally shocked by such a weird gift, but Yuki just laughs and tells her he actually scored the whole thing for free. Cecilia flashes a smile and tells Yuki it looks like he's finally getting the hang of life in Minerva and this whole new world. She remembers that day back at the Demon Lord's castle when he straight up said he wanted to die. She flashes a smile and asks how he's feeling about reality, and that's when Yuki starts opening up. He said he's never been happier, and it's probably because he finally has someone worth living for. All he wants is to be with Cecilia, because she's the whole reason he's even alive. The girl thinks it sounds totally awesome, and just like Yuki, she's searching for a real purpose in life. But when Yuki says it's actually pretty easy, Cecilia just giggles and she says it's been way too long since they last saw each other, so she suggests they snack on cupcakes while she goes to brew some tea. Yuki says okay, but then he asks if that isn't literally a maid's job. Cecilia says Sophia taught her a ton, and now that her cooking is on a whole new level, Yuki is dying for a taste. Draft. After a bit, Cecilia brews some tea, and the guy sits down with her to just vibe and totally relax. Wait, I'll use chill instead of... The guy said the tea was amazing and he was just super happy, while she told him the cupcakes were actually pretty fire too. Yuki had this weird feeling that he was totally forgetting something. He suddenly feels the box in his pocket and remembers he's actually there to give Cecilia the pendant. He stayed at the table with Cecilia, watching her totally vibe out on those cupcakes as she closed her eyes and talked about how amazing they tasted. He gripped the box tight in his pocket, realizing this was his one and only shot. Suddenly, he felt a weird vibe and jumped out of his chair. Cecilia asked Yuki what was wrong, so he walked to the window and made an excuse about needing fresh air. But then, he looked up and saw Hugo and McCain standing right there in front of Cecilia's house. Yuki suspected they were being overheard, so he cranked up his senses to check for spies. Hugo was totally hyped and told Nakana to look because they finally made it to Cecilia's mansion, telling her she should go say hi. McCain tells him to hold up and asks if he even remembers why they came here in the first place. Hugo said he definitely remembers, especially since they totally messed up by leaving an amazing teammate like Cecilia behind. They're only here to get chewed out, and McCain starts by calling the guy a total idiot before punching him straight in the forehead. Hugo tells Makona the pain is just too much, but then he asks if she did it because she was actually worried and thanks her, leaving McCain totally confused about who put those weird ideas in his head. Yuki realized he was the one who did it, and now he knows for sure that Hugo is a total freak for pain. Hugo turns to Makana and asks if she's coming along, but she hits him with a reminder that he still owes her a huge apology. Yuki realizes he's in serious trouble because Hugo and McCanny are headed his way, and they're definitely going to be a massive headache for him. He's desperate to get Cecilia all to himself, so he asks her for a little help with something, but she's totally clueless about what he's actually trying to do. Yuki suddenly grabs her hand and they bolt down the hallway together. She asks where they're even going, and he apologizes to Cecilia, realizing he totally went too far. He knows there's a spot in this house where nobody can find them, so he tells Cecilia to hang tight for a bit. He leaned against the wall to figure out his next move, but Duke called Raven out, asking how long he was going to just sit there doing nothing. She looked down at a shaking Raven like he was total trash and told him to quit stalling and hand over the gift he was clutching. Yuki finally realized that Raven actually wanted to give Happy Nays a gift. The guy was totally spiraling, worried Happiness would hate the gift for being too intense, and he was so terrified of rejection, he didn't know how he'd go on. But the Duke, she reminds him he literally took time off for this, so he needs to stop being such a baby, and he finally admits she's right and decides to just do it. He heads for the door but stops dead in his tracks, his whole body shaking like crazy. Duke yelled at him to get a move on before Happy's lunch break ran out. The guy quickly apologized to Duke, and deep down, Yuki was totally rooting for him. Yuki knew that if he started stressing about Raven now, things would totally spiral out of control, and Cecilia was already waiting for him exactly where he said she'd be. The guy grabs her hand and drags her right after you as she screams, begging to know where he's taking her now. The guy brings Cecily out to the courtyard, where they find Till chatting away and begging Sheik to finally listen to her. She said she checked out the gargoyle yesterday and he looked totally sick, but then she corrected herself and said he's always cool. Yesterday he was just on a whole other level. She asked Sheik if he was even listening, but he just smirked and yelled that he was actually fast asleep. Thiole thought it was way too soon, but she had to tell him anyway, and as Yuki realized Tilly was geeking out over the gargoyle again, he told Cecilia they needed to bail on this place immediately. They spotted Sophia and Celia immediately asked the girl if her daughter was doing okay. Yuki watched them closely as Cecilia walked up to the guy and whispered that eavesdropping was a bad look, but he just shrugged and said he was curious. He's thinking about how Clayman and Sophia already have a kid, and even though Sophia told Celia things are super tough right now, she's desperate to make sure her daughter doesn't. She said it'd be a total mess if she completely took over his personality, but right then Sophia popped up in the doorway and asked Yuki if he was doing all right. The guy is totally freaking out as he grabs Cecilia and yells that they've been spotted, so they start sprinting while Cecilia shouts to Yuki that she already warned him, and they finally make it. Cecilia caught her breath and turned to Yuki, asking him what he was really hunting for in this house. Yuki realized there was zero privacy in that house, so she apologized for totally wearing the girl out. He pulls out a box with a pendant and hands it to Cecilia, making her get super embarrassed. She asks Yuki if he's actually serious about giving her the jewelry, and then a guy asks if she remembers when she couldn't even buy that pendant back at the shop. So he bought this pendant as a gift because this time he's actually for real and more serious than ever. She stopped for a second, gave Yuki a huge smile, and thanked him for real, making him totally blush as she promised to treasure his gift forever. Suddenly, the library door flies open, and Yuki and Cecilia both whip their heads around to see who's there. Yuga was standing right there, and he looked straight at Cecilia and told her he finally found her, with McCain and Hipponese backing him up. He spots Yuki and asks why they're hanging out all by themselves, demanding to know what's actually going on between them. But then Meekin suddenly shuts him up and says Yuki and Cecilia. Raven and Duke walked right up to them, and the girl told the captain he was doing an awesome job. Sophia suddenly turned to the crowd, called them her dear guests, and apologized for the interruption because she wanted them all to head out to the courtyard. All eyes were on her as the whole group nodded along. A bit later, Cecilia and the whole gang were hanging out in the courtyard, munching on some meat skewers. Cecilia hyped Yuki up for bringing a ton of grilled meat, and he totally agreed that it was a great move. Hugo hits up Cecilia to talk to his girl, and as soon as Yuki steps aside, he admits he totally messed up. He started whining that she should just yell at him, but McCann shut him up with a smack to the head before dusting off her hands and turning toward Cecilia. Out of nowhere, McCain dropped to her knees and apologized for spilling the truth, leaving Cecilia absolutely stunned. She flashed a smile and said that whole situation was totally fine, which almost made McCain cry since that girl was her friend. Cecilia sits down next to Makona and asks if she remembers they had no other choice, pointing out that she's still right there with everyone. Cecilia reaches out her hand and tells the girl the torture is finally over, and Mecania is so relieved she can't stop thanking her for the second chance. Yuki looks at the girls and thinks everything is finally back to normal, but then someone tugs on his shirt and he spins around. Iche sneaks up from behind holding a super pretty feather ornament, and when Yuki asks what's going on and if that jewelry is a hair clip, she just says it's a gift. Yuki figures out the jewelry is a gift from Raven, and since Happing almost never gets presents, she tells her to just try it on, so Happing agrees and clips in a new hair ornament. She finally spots them, and he tells Happin that her hairpin looks super cute. Yuki tells Happin the jewelry looks amazing on her, making her totally blush as she thanks him for the compliment. Yuki thinks Happiness looks awesome and Raven totally crushed it. He looked totally crushed and depressed just a second ago. It's probably because he's getting the silent treatment. Duke was right there doing his best to hype him up. Yuki was totally hooked and decided to watch from the sidelines, but then out of nowhere, someone suddenly called out to him. Yuki turns back to ask Cecilia if they're finally done, and she thanks him, saying they only made up because of him, Macone, and Hugo. The guy felt a little guilty about what happened, so he decided he had to help them out somehow. Cecilia thinks it's super sweet, and ever since she met Yuki, her whole life has been on a total lucky streak. She's really hoping he'll keep looking out for her, and Yuki's totally down, thinking it already feels like they've been dating forever and just hoping things stay this awesome. The next day, he heads over to the guild and bangs on the chair, asking Claymon when he's finally getting that A-rank promotion. The guy was just flipping through some papers when he asked why he suddenly had to give him a rank up. Yuki complains about only getting B-rank missions, but Claymon thinks he's crazy because hitting that rank in just 6 months is actually legendary. Yuki's itching to get moving right away, but Claymon just scratches his head and tells him to forget about it. Hitting a rank means way tougher missions, which just gives Yuki more chances to mess with his life. The guy gets super mad because he'll have to work way harder now, and Yuki finally realizes why he's been acting so weird. The dude is just straight up lazy. Yuki heads back from the guild and groans about being totally bored, wishing he could jump into a way harder mission right now. Claymon ended up rejecting him anyway, because giving a high rank to a guy who's only been there for 6 months would totally piss off the rest of the guild. And it's pretty clear Claymon is still keeping a close eye on him. He's mostly just stressed about the massive headache this kid is going to cause him, and realizing that totally ruins his mood. A bit later, the young man gets back and shouts that he's home, so Yuki points out that Guy usually just sleeps when no one's around. But the gargoyle is surprised Yuki. Yuki says he's basically done with his goal because he figured the whole deal was a total bust anyway. So Guy tells the kid he's got something he needs to say. Then he finally revealed his true form, leaving Yuki totally confused about what was happening and why Guy would do that so suddenly. The gargoyle finally hits its true form as his whole body starts cracking wide open. Yuki was totally freaked out and asked what that thing even was, especially after seeing massive cracks splitting all over the gargoyle's body. Guy admitted that the last fight totally wrecked him. His body is so broken that it's never going back to normal. Yuki yelled at him for keeping it a secret for so long. But Yuki says there's gotta be a cure out there, and she's 100% sure Tio will find a way to save the gargoyle. Guy says they don't get to choose who lives or dies, and since he's almost out of time, his body is totally going to give out in just 5 days. He wants Yuki to watch over Till since she's also still healing up just like him, and Yuki is totally shocked, asking if he's actually for real. The gargoyle says she's been acting way worse lately, and since he's watched them since they were little kids, he notices every single change instantly. Yuki agrees to take over Till, and Guy apologizes for the trouble before trying to wrap things up. But Yuki stops him right there because he's still got one more thing to say. Yuki strikes a sick pose and says he's definitely saving Guy too because he's already made up his mind. Guy wonders if the kid hit his head, but since he's almost out of time, he thinks everything is a waste until Yuki snaps back and asks how he knows they'll fail if they... The guy tells Sky to just lean on him, saying the house would be way too boring without him around since he's basically been a work of art this whole time. He's got zero hope left and says his only move now is to just sit back and wait. He says he trusts this young guy to look after Teal, but Yuki knows he'll be worried sick about her until the very end, even if his own life is in serious danger. Yuki says Duke is the pro for demon gear, but he's still trying to figure out where she's hiding. Yuki finally makes it to the Knight's headquarters where Duke and Irina are already waiting, and Duke is totally shocked to see the captain walk through the door. Yuki's gasping for air as he shouts that he finally found a girl, but Duke just asks what the captain wants and tells him to chill on the couch while she finishes her paperwork. He crashed onto the couch, complaining about how exhausted he was, and while he wished he could just fly, he knew Cecilia would absolutely lose it. Our guy was just chilling and catching his breath when Irene suddenly walked right up to him. She introduced herself and said she noticed how he and the Duke are always backing each other up, so she's dying to know what their deal is. Right as he died, the guy said his name was Yuki, and thought about how easy it was to trick that girl. He explained that he and Duke were actually partners with Yuki as the captain, leaving Irina totally stunned because she thinks Yuki is such an amazing person. Irina asks what kind of captain Yuki really is, but he says it's a total secret, and if he tells her, she's a goner, which leaves her absolutely terrified. Duke suddenly steps up and asks the captain exactly what he just said to Irina. The guy apologized and said he just wanted to see how she'd react. Duke told Irene that whatever that guy said was a total lie, and when she asked if he was serious, he just claimed Captain was a random nickname. She tells him she needs a private word with the captain, so Irina bows and heads out. Yuki figured Duke would be the expert on demons, so they asked him for help, and Duke revealed that the gargoyle's body was slowly falling to pieces. Duke says magic minerals are the key to fixing everything. It's actually super simple. Yuki is totally shocked that the solution is that basic. He's convinced there's no way. Duke figured the guy should have known what was up, but Yuki told him the dude was literally just sleeping in the temple the whole time. It makes total sense why he's clueless. Duke asks what would actually be better for the guy. Since he's a demon, he really shouldn't even be asking stuff like that. Duke actually found a way to save the gargoyle's life, and when the creature thanked the girl, Duke just told him it was no big deal, and that she was stoked to help out. Now he's got to figure out where to find those magic minerals and what they even look like. He's already thinking about heading back to grill Duke for answers when someone suddenly screams at him from the side. He spins around and spots Cecilia sprinting right at him. Cecilia is totally winded as she tells Yuki that Till is in deep trouble, and Yuki starts panicking, asking if things are actually that bad. The priest says Till just randomly collapsed while cleaning, and even though Sheik is looking after her, she's begging for him to come over. Yuki realizes he and the gargoyle might actually be linked since they both feel sick, while Cecilia starts worrying about what could have happened to him. Yuki spills the beans to Cecilia, and she's totally shocked to hear the gargoyle only has 5 days left to live. But Yuki tells her he's already found a way to save it. Yuki told them they had to handle things right now anyway. They finally make it to Till's house, but the girl is looking totally wrecked. And after she says hi to the captain, Yuki asks if she's even doing okay. Right then, Sheik was scrambling to get the medicine ready for the girl, promising to do his best even though he was dangerously low on supplies. Yuki says he gets it and heads off to find a new lead, while Sheik tells him that's exactly what a captain does, putting all his faith in the kid. Sheik said their time was running out and he couldn't leave the girl alone, but you could see in his eyes that he was totally exhausted. Cecilia asked if Sheik was actually worried about Tila, and he admitted he was since he felt like her condition was totally his fault. Our hero told everyone to trust him to get the medicine, but Cecilia stepped in and said she'd handle it herself. Yuki asks what she's talking about, and Cecilia calls him out for totally forgetting he's supposed to look after the gargoyle, so Shake hands him a massive list of herbs, while Yuki swears. Shik asked what Cecilia and Yuki were whispering about, and what was up with that weird gargoyle. Yuki finally decided to spill the beans and explain the whole situation. But right then, Till's voice. Shik tells her she's too weak to move, but Till screams that she's totally fine, and they have to rush to save the gargoyle. Even though she's starting to cry, she grabs the girl's hand and tells her not to stress, because Yuki is definitely going to find a way to save the gargoyle. Cecilia kept on smiling with that super bright glow, and Teal actually had to ask if it was real before admitting it was totally awesome. She told her she needs to look out for herself too, and since she, Shik, and Yuki are watching Till, she can finally stop worrying and just get some rest. Teal passes out from Cecilia's magic, and then she tells Yuki that her whole job is just to heal people and fix them up. So the guy just needs to let her take over, and she flashes him a super sweet smile. Yuki's down for it, so Shik asks to stick around and help out until 2. Yuki heads out to find some magic minerals, while Cecilia goes to grab healing herbs for Till, and Yuki tells her and Sheik to give it everything they've got for Till and... A bit later, our guy hits up the merchant guild, but the worker there apologizes and says those magic minerals aren't in stock yet. Yuki was totally shocked and asked if they really didn't exist, and the guy told him that was exactly right. Yuki was super frustrated because he'd literally double-checked that they had his stuff before even coming here. Out of nowhere, Claymon pops up right next to the guy, and the worker says sorry for the wait while letting him know that all the mission info he wanted is finally ready. The guy hands Claymon a note while the whole crowd goes wild, making everyone else wonder if he's actually some kind of superstar. Claym turned to the guy and asked if this mission was way tougher than the last one, and he confirmed that the payout was way bigger too. Claymon spots the guy and tells him he's right on time, but Yuki shuts him down instantly before Claymon can even say what he wants. Yuki wants the guy to finish the mission, but they've got to wait because he needs to hunt down some magic minerals first. Claymon asks about the magic minerals and realizes he's actually super lucky, because he can grab them just by finishing this mission. Claymon promised to share the goods if the guy helped him out, and the kid was like, "Wait, are you actually serious?" Claymon asks the guy what rank he's aiming for, since he's got the clout to pull some strings and get him promoted. Yuki can't believe this is actually the person behind all the chaos, but honestly, it doesn't even matter anymore. The guy says if he needs those minerals right now, they can head out tomorrow morning, and Yuki is all for it since he'd do literally anything for a magic miner. The guy says they've got a deal, but the merchant asks if they're actually down to take on the job. Claymon agrees and swears he won't let the guy down, but Yuki thinks he's totally full of himself. Yuki asks for the lowdown, and Claymon explains they just need to find magic minerals, so they're meeting up at the guild at the crack of dawn. Claymon says goodbye to the guy, but Yuki's left wondering why he was being so vague about the details of the case. Yuki knew he didn't have a choice anymore, and since Cecilia and Sheik were giving it everything they had, he decided it was time to go all out too. The next morning, Yuki goes to meet up with Cecilia and is totally shocked to find her waiting right there by the carriage. A girl walks up to say hi, he says hey back, and then asks what she's even doing there. Cecilia says she's got backup and points right at the carriage where Sophia and Claymon are just chilling. Yuki and Cecilia hopped into the carriage, and when he asked what was going on, she explained that the herb shops were totally out of the medicine he needed. Since these herbs only grow in spots packed with magic, she asked Sophia to tag along and help, especially since the lady of the house was in serious trouble, and Sophia couldn't just sit. Yuki thinks it's totally sick, and since Sophia's husband has a work mission at that same spot, she's just gonna tag along with him. Yuki realizes they're both heading to the same spot, so he stops to ask what exactly happened to the guy he's pointing at. Sophia looks totally unbothered as she tells Yuki and Cecilia that Claymon tried to stop her, but they shouldn't worry because she's already handled it her way, while Claymon just blinks and gets up from her lap. Claymon says he only gets a good rest on Sophia's lap, but Yuki's wondering if he's even fully awake since he's talking total nonsense. Cecilia was totally blown away by Claymon's insane healing skills, but he just said that Sophia was the absolute best magic for him. Yuki sees the guy is finally back to his senses and tells him the plan. They need to head into the magic mineral mines and wipe out all the monsters living there. He heard they were only C rank, but they couldn't be totally sure yet, even though Yuki thinks everything is chill for now. Our hero is stressing about making it there on time, but Yuki's got a backup plan to just fly straight to the gargoyle using his magic minerals if things go sideways. Claymon tells them to hold off on reporting to the guild, and when Cecilia asks what's the deal, he says he just wants them to enjoy their trip to the max. Sophia suddenly smacks her husband and tells him to shut his mouth, but even though he says he gets the girl's request, Yuki and Cecilia think the whole thing is just straight up mean. They finally make it to the hotel, where Sophia says they'll crash for the night before hitting the mines tomorrow morning, and Cecilia is totally on board. Yuki realizes he's only ever seen Sophia in her maid outfit, and he's super curious to see what she's actually going to wear for the fight. The next morning, Sophia finds Yuki and Cecilia and tells them it's finally go time, but Yuki is totally shocked she's still wearing her maid outfit, while Cecilia wonders if she can even fight. Sophia says this is just her solo battle gear, so they're totally safe, but she gets super flustered when her husband admits he loves the look. Claymon walked up to ask what their deal was and told them they had to keep moving. They find a cave where Cecilia uses her light magic to guide the group, but then Yuki drops a total bombshell by asking the guy if he's obsessed with maids, leaving him completely shocked. Yuki brings up how Claymon liked the look, and the guy totally gets it, saying that seeing Sophia in those clothes makes him feel way more relaxed because she looks like she's just doing a normal job. Yuki's totally shocked and says he finally gets what the guy is saying. Then Claymon speaks up and tells him not to think he's forcing her into this, but Yuki admits Yuki switches gears and asks if Claymon and Sophia actually have kids, and the guy confirms they've got a boy and a girl. But the crazy part is the son looks just like. Sophia turns around and tells them to quit the small talk because the monsters are already right on top of them. Yuki's just about to tell everyone the monsters are already here, but then Sophia suddenly pops out of nowhere. She throws a massive kick and wipes out every monster, leaving Yuki totally frozen in shock as Sophia flattens the beast in an instant. Claymon points out that even though Sophia is a maid now, she's still a total beast, and while he gets that the new guy wants to protect Lady Cecilia too, this is strictly his and Sophia's turf. Claymon triggers his magic and a bunch of paper guys suddenly spawn around him, so Yuki asks Cecilia what they're even supposed to be. She explains that this shikigami is a divine beast, a martial arts technique used to control objects that look like humans or animals. Yuki admits he's never seen anyone fight with paper dolls before, and Cecilia totally agrees, warning him that they're actually way stronger than they look. Sophia explains he picked this move because he wants to fight without actually getting his hands dirty. He thinks changing their forms is a total drag, so he just lets them fight exactly as they are, and Yuki says, Sophia says they've got everything they need to keep moving, and after checking the map, the guy realizes they've made huge progress and are almost at the mining area. Claymon looks way off into the distance and spots this massive, round monster just munching on some rocks. Yuki was totally blown away by how massive and weirdly colored this thing was, but Claymon explained that it actually eats magical minerals because regular rocks just aren't enough for a mutant like him. Yuki warns that if they don't act fast, they're gonna lose everything. They have to take this guy down immediately. But Claymon tells him to wait because he's not. This monster eats magic rocks to evolve, and since they're packed with energy, hitting him with magic won't do a single thing. He points right at Cecilia and Yuki, telling them they don't stand a chance against this monster. Fia smacks his hands and tells him to stop pointing, while Yuki realizes they won't even be able to scratch this monster. He knows his high-level magic would totally wreck this monster, but there's just no space to pull it off. Claymon warns Cecilia and Yuki that this mutant is super rare, so they better not wreck it. Sophia asks why he'd take such a trash mission, and Claymon just screams at her to stop hurting him, yelling that he's already got a super simple plan all figured out. He points at the kid and says he'll cover him in shikigami so he can wreck the monster from the inside, then asks if he thinks the plan is totally genius. Yuki freaked out and asked why he had to do it, but Claymon told him he was too busy controlling the shikigami to handle two things at once. He tells him the dolls will keep him safe so he shouldn't worry, but Yuki screams that he wouldn't do that for anything in the world. Suddenly, Sophia jumps in and says she'll handle it, but Claymon is totally shocked and tells her there's no way he's letting her do that. So she reminds him that she tries to chill her husband out, telling him everything is going to be okay. She promises that as long as he pulls off his special technique, they're totally safe. Then she looks over to Sophia, flashes a grin and says she's totally counting on him, so the guy realizes there's no way he can let her down now. Yuki's totally weirded out because he's never seen Claymon act like this. Then the guy turns to Yuki and Cecilia, tells them to keep a close eye on the... Claymon gave the word, and right away Yuki dropped a grounding lock spell while Cecilia fired off her holy chains. Stone spikes and heavy chains had the beast pinned down, but it suddenly let out a massive roar and started ripping itself loose. Yuki cranked up his magic and yelled that they'd totally underestimated their enemy, so they went all out with holy chains, grounding locks, crushing water, and a massive snowstorm. The monster let out another massive roar, and just as Cecilia started freaking out about the noise, Sophia cut her off and said it was finally her turn to handle things. Shiota swore the monster opened its mouth and screamed Sophia's name, so he quickly used his Shikigami magic to wrap his paper dolls all around her. She pulled off a crazy smooth jump right into the monster's open mouth. He had no clue what was happening until his body started warping because Sophia was literally punching him from the inside. Claymon summoned a whole swarm of paper dolls and ordered the monster to stop fighting back, finally unleashing his real Shikigami into the heat of battle. Yuki was totally shocked that Claymon actually summoned real Shikigami, saying he's never seen him go this hard, but Cecilia realized it's because Sophia is already trapped inside that monster. Claym turned to Yuki and Cecilia, telling them to stay ready until that monster finally stopped moving, and they both nodded. The monster finally blacked out with Sophia pinning it down, so Yuki reached out to Cecilia and told her she did an awesome job, and while she cheered that they actually pulled it off, Sophia hits the ground and he instantly rushes over to scoop her up into his arms. He asked if she was doing okay and told her he was super happy, making Sophia blush as she insisted she was totally fine. She shoved Claym away and told him to let her go, but they weren't done yet since they still had to find more healing herbs while Yuki and Cecilia just watched and giggled. Yuki walks up to the monster and starts stuffing magic minerals into his pack, but he's worried because they still need herbs, and the beast scattered those stones everywhere. After searching forever, they finally found what they were looking for, and as Yuki looked up at the full moon, she realized it had already gotten super dark out. Claymon says it's all over and they're stuck there for the night, telling Yuki to just chill until morning, but Yuki's not having it and says there's no way he can just relax. She leans over and whispers to Cecilia, asking if he can fly, but Cecilia warns her it would look way too suspicious and people would start asking way too many questions. He asks what if someone catches them, but Yuki knows that even though it's a massive risk, they can't wait any longer. When he asks if something actually went down, Yuki just brushes it off and says he's super tired. Sophia snaps that she's also in a bad mood since it's been way too long since her last guild mission, so she tells Yuki they need to head back to the boarding house and crash, and he's totally down with that. It was late at night, and as Yuki lay in bed, he couldn't stop worrying that Till and Guy might not even survive until sunrise. Yuki snaps his eyes open and realizes he can't sleep, so he hops out of bed, sees Claymon knocked out next to him, and thinks about how it's been. He walks into the dining room and finds Cecilia just chilling there with some tea, so when Yuki asks what she's up to, she tells him she's been waiting for him this whole time. She walks up and hands him a bag of healing herbs for Sheik, and Yuki promises he'll get the job done. Cecilia sees Sophia is totally knocked out, thinking today was just way too much for her. She told the landlord she'd watch the house while he ate dinner, giving Yuki the perfect chance to fly. Yuki realizes Cecilia planned every single detail for him. He thanks her but asks why. She just smirked and told him she was only curious to see if he'd actually go through with it. She says the owner is out but should be back any second, and Yuki thinks she's super sweet for helping as he thanks her and heads out. Gross smiles and tells the guy to stay safe, then Yuki heads out the door. He sprouts wings and horns, telling them he needs this form to finally go all out. He'd way rather be anywhere else, but this is a total emergency, so Yuki rushes back home. He creeps into his room, knowing he has to watch his back even in his own home, while Yuki walks in and tells the gargoyle to wake up. He looks at Guy's cracked head and screams that it's too late, shaking him like crazy and begging him to just wake up. Yuki starts calling Guy out for being a jerk and asks if he's really gonna ditch the girl, but Guy suddenly snaps awake and yells at him to stop all that shouting. Our Guy lets out a huge sigh of relief, saying he's just glad he actually made it. Guy says that since the kid crashed his dream, the path is finally showing him exactly what he needs. Yuki gives the green light but tells Guy he's gotta eat first, so Guy starts shoving magic minerals into his face while yelling that he'll explain everything later. But for now, Guy starts chomping down on the magic minerals, admitting he has zero clue what the kid is actually trying to pull off. Suddenly, the cracks on Guy's body start vanishing, leaving the gargoyle totally confused as he checks himself out, while Yuki lets out a huge sigh and tells him he's finally... Guy screamed at him to stop stuffing his face, while Yuki quickly apologized and said he was just in a massive rush. Guy says it tasted great, so he took his sweet time, and when Yuki asks if he's seriously talking about minerals, Guy just hands over the bag and says there's still half left. Guy is totally hyped and shouts that he's gonna finish every single bite. Yuki realized Guy was so obsessed with those minerals that he didn't even notice the tricks, and he was just grinning like a little kid with a pile of candy. Guy pulls out a weird rock and asks what it is, while Yuki realizes it's actually a stone eater's horn and wonders how he even got it. But then Guy just decides. He says the stone tastes totally different, but then he starts screaming about his body burning up, leaving Yuki absolutely terrified. Guy had a huge grin on his face and started screaming that he was burning up, while a terrified Yuki asked if he was actually doing okay. Just like that, Guy shifts into his true form, his arm snaps back into place, and massive wings sprout out. He and Yuki just stared at each other, totally confused about what just happened. Yuki couldn't stop thinking about those crazy wings and horns Guy was rocking. It had to be the power. Yuki tells the gargoyle he's running out of time and has to bail, waving goodbye as he takes off. He gets to Cecilia's mansion and heads inside to find Till in bed, with Sheik standing right there by her side. Yuki's convinced that Sheik has been hanging out with Till this entire time. Plus, this girl means the world to him. Yuki shakes Sheikah awake and shows off the healing herbs he brought, but Sheikah is totally confused and asks who he even is. He snaps his eyes open and asks the captain why he looks like a total demon, but Yuki just says it's only temporary. Yuki hands Sheikah the bag of herbs he asked for, tells him he's got to bounce, and asks him to look after Till while Sheikah gives a quick greeting. Yuki chills on a tree branch and decides it's finally time to head back. He rips off his own horns and wings before flying to meet Claymon, Cecilia, and Sophia. Then Yuki just collapses into bed because he's totally wiped out. The next morning, Sophia wakes Yuki up, and he's so groggy he can barely even tell who she is. She says that since Clamande and the other girl were still fast asleep, she had to be the one to wake them up. She says it's time to head back to Minerva, and as Yuki opens her eyes, she knows they have to go, but feels like there's no reason to rush out just yet. Everyone was finally in the carriage, but Yuki was stumbling all over the place, so Cecilia asked if he was doing okay. Clamande teased him about what he was doing all night to be so exhausted, but Sophia insisted he slept like a baby, while Yuki was just too drained to even talk, and apologized for being a total zombie. He's got his head resting right on Cecilia's lap while she looks down at him with a super sweet smile. A bit later, Cecilia looks down at the guy resting on her lap and asks if he's finally awake. She tells him they're almost there, so he finally gets up from her lap while Kaiman giggles about how Cecilia and Yuki are so close. It's actually adorable. Yuki finally got what the guy was saying and apologized, but Cecilia just flashed a smile and told him it was no big deal. She thanked Yuki and asked if his yesterday was really as crazy as it sounded. Yuki saw Cecilia's huge smile and realized that all his hard work was totally worth it for an award like this. He said he was crashing the second he got home, and even though Claman was wide awake and starving, Yuki totally shut down the idea of going out. A few days later, Till is over at Yuki's house crying her eyes out because she's just so relieved Mr. Gargoyle is safe, and she feels totally crushed that Guy apologized for making her stress out, explaining he only kept it a secret so she wouldn't worry, and then he said sorry one more time just to be sure. Yuki tried to get some sleep, but she finally asked the guy why he kept apologizing since she wasn't even blaming him. Then she just told him to talk about something else. Guy turns around to look at Yuki and tells him they owe him everything, and Till chimes in to say she's super thankful too. Everyone kept shouting their thanks, but he just lay there on the ground, feeling his eyes start to drift shut. Till thanks Cecilia and Yuki one more time, and Yuki can tell that things between Till and Guy are way better now. She gave the gargoyle a massive hug and looked absolutely thrilled. Our hero just walked out the door and told them straight up he wasn't going to get involved. A few days later, Yuki finally realized Till was hanging out with Guy, and since he was visiting the gargoyle every single day, the two of them started pulling all kinds of crazy pranks together. Yuki's stuck watching them. and he finally realizes there's no way he can survive in this crazy atmosphere forever. Look, they both literally almost died, so you can't blame them for acting crazy. He just needs to hang in there for a bit. He can't just stay stuck at home forever, so he hits the streets. But after wandering everywhere, he realizes there's absolutely nothing cool going on. He spots a massive crowd and wonders why it's so packed, so he stops a random person to find out what's going on. This Beastman guy turns around and asks if they've met before, and Yuki just says, hey. The guy explains that since the Demon Lord was taken down, the market has totally blown up, and now you can even buy super rare artifacts, which Yuki thinks is absolutely epic. He waves goodbye to the Beastman, loving the rare hype energy of the crowd, and decides to look around now that he's finally feeling way better. The kid spots him walking and heads right over to say what's up. Yuki asks why he's there and if he's actually shopping, then wonders if there's any guild news, but the guy says he's just on a day off and Clayman is totally lost trying to find an anniversary gift for Sophia, and Yuki points out that he's seriously cutting it close. Yuki thinks Claymon might find something here, and the guy asks if he's for real, admitting that's the whole reason he showed up. Yuki offers to help the guy, and since Clayman tells him to do whatever he wants, Yuki just asks the man to look right at him. She shows off this super cute cat ear headband with a massive grin on her face. Yuki says this hairpin is the perfect match for the maid outfit, and honestly, that's exactly what Claymon is into. He tries to hand over the jewelry, but the guy gets totally offended and says it's not his style at all, so there's no way he's making the trade. He tells him to quit messing around since it's an anniversary gift, so Yuki just apologizes and says he totally forgot. The guy admits he's acting a bit weird today and asks if everything's cool, but he's really just hyped because after all the crazy stuff he's been through, he's finally in a great mood again. He hands over the cash and sneakily slides the jewelry into the guy's backpack just to mess with him. Yuki starts screaming that he found something totally epic, and Kaimon spins around to see what's up. He tells the guy to look at the black fabric and says it's just a long coat that edgy middle schoolers wear when they're going through their 8th grade syndrome phase. She tells him he's got killer taste because this coat is literally the best thing ever made, so Yuki decides right then and there that he's taking it. He starts grabbing everything because it all looks totally awesome. The guy stared at that massive bag and told him it looked like he totally overdid it. Yuki says he's usually way too busy to shop, so he's going all out today. But Clayman notices he's picking up some really weird stuff. Yuki says he just follows his heart, even if it's stuck in a cringy middle school phase. And while Clayman thinks he's a total weirdo, Yuki doesn't. Our MC checks out the foreign spices and new apron Clayman gave him, thinking the guy is a total pro at picking gifts. And since he's finally done shopping, he asks where they're heading next. Since he helped pick out the gift, the man suggests grabbing a new quest at the guild, and Yuki shouts that he's totally down for it. The guy asks if he's actually serious, so Yuki tells him to hold on, ducks around the corner to change, and sprints back looking totally wild in a black helmet, a matching cape. He laughs and asks Claymon what he thinks of his new look, but the guy just asks if he's messing with him. Yuki whips around to show off his lightning-shaped blade and says there's no point in talking because he hasn't been this fired up in forever, screaming that absolutely nobody can stop him now. Clayman scratches his ear, thinking this guy is a total lost cause and that saying anything right now will just make things way worse.